Cool. Sorry that we are 2 minutes late to the party, but I was enjoying my conversation with today's guest. 15 people in chat already, and it's not even the normal time, so thank you very much. Nice early one, because we do have an Australian on today. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible, because I know everybody is going to want to get into this chat as soon as possible. But hello, Jonas. How are you doing, my friend? I know he's excited. Hello, Dan. Hello, Tree. How are you doing? Paul's making the Aussie stay up for once. Yeah, Tyson last time, the bastard. Oh, we've sworn already, guys. It's gone downhill. It's gone downhill. Yeah, early gang. Hello, Mr. Scandinavian Guanas. How are you doing? Are you watching? He knows what he's watching for, so I'm going to get this out of the way now, everybody. Yesterday, this is too much information for the internet, but I had a small procedure in a certain area, which means I'm quite uncomfortable. We'll put it at that. Okay, if you know, you know. Hello, Rick. Thank you for waking up at 5:30 a.m. to tune in. I appreciate you. Hello, Ben. Hopefully your internet holds out. Hello, Riddler. I know he is sneaking in at work. Right, I'm just seeing who else is here. I am completely ignoring all of your comments. I'm not going to lie. Right. Look who's in the chat. Wow. Hello. How are you doing, Luke? Right. Let's get some housekeeping out of the way, people, and then let's get into this podcast. So I have created this, wherever it is. Shout out to the Bug Factory for people that want some sustainable insect products made from 100% recycled refrigerators. If you use Pools-Monitors-5 at checkout, you get 5% off your first order of bugs. They are the cheapest bugs I have found online in the UK, and they have great quality products. The grow pods are probably something I may or may not start using now that I'm getting a bit more into geckos, but for the most part, the live food is my go-to now, and I absolutely love them. And they made it all the way to Scotland with, pretty sure, no dead on arrival. So yeah, check them out. And then obviously thank you to you guys. Thank you to the Patreon. Thank you everyone that supports me that little bit more. Feel free to jump on over the link in the description. All the tiers are the exact same rewards, no matter how much you want to support me. You get entrance into the private Discord, and you can just chat more than I chat to people anyway. So thank you to everybody on Patreon. I love you all very dearly. I appreciate your support more than you know. You help me keep the lights on over here. Speak of the devil, and he shall arise. How are you doing? How's everyone doing? I hope I haven't missed anybody. And I'm going to try my best to keep an eye on the chat. Just checking. I don't think I've missed anybody. All right. Any questions, guys, drop them in. I will try and get to them the best I can. But without further ado, very excited to announce this week's guest on the podcast. It's Luke from Beaches Scaly Beasts. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, good in yourself?
Yeah, I'm not bad, mate. I'm not bad. You know my said issues that I've shared with you, even though we've just met. But other than that, we're going all right.
That's good. That's very good. Feels weird being on this side.
Like just being the interviewed rather than the interviewer.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a little while since I've done a podcast, let alone a live video. So it'll be good fun.
I have caught a couple of your podcasts. It's I've been so busy at work, but I have caught a couple of your podcasts of late, and it's been really enjoyable, to be fair.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we've got the microphones out, but we'll get there again one day.
I appreciate you blowing the dust off it for me today.
Yeah. Won't actually blow it. That'll blow out your audio.
Yeah, Paul's got the cushions ready. Paul's not got the cushions, but Paul was told off for climbing upstairs. All right, without further ado, mate, let's just get into this. We've got some quick fire questions.
Sure.
So, unlike Tyson, who took over an hour to answer these, we'll try and get through them in like 5 minutes.
To be honest, I thought that was like your whole podcast with him.
No, he just decided to like make it his own thing. So, snakes or lizards?
Both, but I do prefer lizards. But snakes got me into lizards more.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about that later because that's interesting. Money or time?
Time.
Mentally strong or physically strong?
Both.
Wild caught good, wild caught bad?
Wild caught good.
Pro snake rack, no snake rack?
Anti-snake rack nowadays.
arid species or tropical species?
Arid 100%.
Normally, there's a bit where Fee has two animals, but I'll be completely 100% honest. I forgot to ask her. So I'm going to think of two animals off the top of my head for you in Fee fashion for you to pick from. So I'm going to go for ladybugs or praying mantises.
Ladybugs.
Ladybugs, right? Let me just reply to her now. Actually, I don't need to type this. Fee, put in the chat right now two animals, and we'll do the official Fee one. I completely such a bad boyfriend. Big reptiles or small reptiles?
Small reptiles.
Big monitors or dwarf monitors?
Silly question. Dwarf monitors.
All day. Gilleni gang.
Yep.
Instagram famous or YouTube famous?
YouTube.
Right. I need to lean down without killing myself because I have to do the prop. Pro Crocs, no Crocs.
No Crocs.
Oh, we were getting on so well.
Nah, bare feet if you're going to do it.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm not that hardcore yet, to be fair. I'm not going to try and pretend that I am.
Are they even comfortable?
Yeah, honestly. Like, I'll be 100% honest with you, right? I was a hater. I was very much one of those people that was like, oh, no, they look stupid. Like, oh, this, that, and the other. And Fee, she's quite into them. And I can't remember how it even came about, but basically she brought me a pair. And honestly, mate, I love them. Like, I'm not going to pretend that they look sexy. I don't feel like a sex icon when I'm wearing my camo Crocs, but they are very comfortable, like very and easy just to slip on and off when you're putting about in the reptile room and going outside and shit. So obviously, if you're barefoot, I quite like being barefoot in the house and the garden, but like actually out, I guess as you would call it, the bush. But going out herping, nah, I can't barefoot it. I'm too much of a sissy for that at the minute. I'll be honest.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying in the bush, but like, you know, if you got thongs over there or slides or something like that,
like this is
have to be those
okay, I'm
plastic
not
things.
going to lift it up, but I'm currently barefoot. The Crocs are up here for some reason, but I am barefoot. I like being barefoot. And I want to buy those barefoot shoes just as a general to like wear out and about because I like the toe spread. But the Crocs allow me to do that as well.
Yeah, cool.
Look at me trying to go anti-Croc now. Guys, stop. No. It's my brand. Crocs sponsor me. Right, Fee has asked if you would rather the two animals, prawns or squids?
Squids.
Squids. All right, there we go. Feisty or tame?
Tame.
And then the final question, doesn't have to be a species that you own, but in your opinion, what is the best pet monitor?
Gilleni.
Facts. How you doing, Mr. Frizzle's Reptiles? And a new person is this a friend of yours? Hazardous Wastelander. I don't think I've seen you before. Camera Crocs.
Don't recognise the name, but it doesn't mean you're not.
No, but hello, thank you for tuning in. So I'm sure every single person here knows exactly who you are, but if you would like to introduce yourself and a bit about yourself and what you keep.
Yep. Okay. Well, my name's Luke. I have an addiction to lizards, and it's taken over my life. No, it's
help.
Yeah, my name is Luke. I have been keeping reptiles for, I'm going to say probably about 11 years now, maybe 12 years, something like that. Like most people, kind of started off small, grew into it very quickly, did the whole Noah's Ark type thing where I wanted one of everything, and you start kind of snowballing and things. And then, you know, as we'll talk about later, kind of reeled it back a little bit. But I started off in geckos. So I've always had a soft spot for geckos. Started with like leaf-tailed geckos and knob-tailed geckos and things like that. Eventually kind of got into bearded dragons a little bit. But I remember seeing a photo of a green tree python in a book. I can't even remember what the book was, but I was like, that snake is amazing. One day I'm going to own that snake. And over here in New South Wales, you have to have other python species for a couple of years before you can kind of upgrade your license to get a green tree python. So I had to kind of, you know, wet my toes, so to speak, and get some smaller pythons. So ended up getting a couple of Stimson's pythons, and then that kind of led me into breeding pythons and things like that. And yeah, it kind of just just keeps snowballing, really. And I suppose, you know, I kind of feigned interest in between different species and things, and just, you know, it took a little while to kind of settle on what I really like. But yeah, that's a roundabout introduction as to how I got started in it. Growing up as a kid, you know, I grew up kind of backing onto bush all the time and stuff, so it wasn't uncommon to see a blue tongue here, or a red belly there, or a leaf-tailed gecko here, or sort of thing. So, you know, it's pretty common here in Australia. We are kind of like the land of the lizards, so they're kind of everywhere. And, you know, thanks to the UK, you guys have David Attenborough over there, who likes to make brilliant documentaries that seem to inspire a lot of naturalists out there. So I think that just kind of, you know, all that sort of stuff kind of shaped who I am. My mum and dad were very pro pet as a kid, so we all had a menagerie of different critters, from rats and birds and fish. We had seahorses at one point, you know, we had dogs, cats, you know, just a variety of stuff. Never really got into the reptiles at a younger age. But yeah, like, man, I remember sitting down on like Saturday nights and watching things like Harry Butler in the Wild, and, you know, just like classic sort of like Australian bush icons, going out there and seeing reptiles. Obviously Steve Irwin, Malcolm Douglas. Malcolm Douglas was an awesome one. Used to love watching that old fella make damper over a fire. But, you know, like shows like that just kind of really inspired me and showed me what was out there in the Australian bush. And, you know, they'd quite often do segments on native wildlife and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know, I just got addicted to it. Animals are amazing.
They sure are. I can relate a lot, because obviously, I don't know if you do or don't know, but it's not really something on the map, but the UK have 6 native species of reptiles. We have 3 lizards, 3 snakes. That's it. But even then, like, we have 3 frog/toads and 3 newts. We don't have any salamanders here, but even though we only had 12 natives, I was so just like, oh my God, I need to find them. I need to find them. And you have this like almost obsession, as we'll talk about in a bit, that can become quite unhealthy. And I think everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but I think a lot of people follow that snowball path of like, oh, I can have this and this is cool, and now we can get that, and oh my God, I feel like I can get that. Just as a quick question as that, because I know in Australia, like you say, you had to keep a few snakes before you could get different licensing or permitting to own a different species. Do you think that's, for example, if you wanted a green tree python, you'd have to earn your stripes before you can own a green tree python? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think it should be a bit more unregulated, like the UK, where if anyone wanted a green tree python, they could buy a green tree python?
I don't necessarily think it should be unregulated, but I do think it's a fucking stupid idea that you got to invest this time and money into an animal that you might not necessarily want. So, you know, I have nothing against Stimson's pythons. I think they're a great snake. But if I wanted to go out and get a green tree python and that was the only python that I cared about, maybe, you know, there could have been some sort of educational process or something there, just to kind of make a keeper aware of some of the difficulties that might be with one of those sort of more advanced species or something like that. Like, yeah, I think it's kind of silly. It's just like, it's the same with everything here. Like, to get a mangrove monitor in our state, you'd have to keep it ACCI for 2 years, or you know, a similar species on the lower class. And I think if somebody, it can go 2 ways. You can either fall in love with that animal that you have to kind of keep originally, or if they don't really want that, then is that animal going to get the best care for that 2 years just so they can get the upgraded license to get into what they really want to keep? You know, so like, I can understand it as a stepping stone type thing, but it kind of depends on the species as well. You know, I think if a lot of people are wanting to do enough to learn about an animal, then I shouldn't see a reason why they shouldn't be able to keep it.
Yeah, I agree completely, because over here we have beginner species, and in my opinion, a beginner species is just an animal that's harder to kill, and that's the harsh truth of it. So bearded dragons are beginner species, leopard geckos, crested geckos are beginner species, corn snake, royal pythons. We have a beardy here. I love our beardy. I think she's a great little character. But for example, those 5 species, I could appreciate all of them, but for me, they've never been on my path. But they're forced down your throat when you go into a pet shop. not all pet shops, but some pet shops in the UK, they'll be like, for example, if you want an Aki, you don't have to own a bearded dragon first, but people will be like, oh, if you start with a beardy, then you can understand the basics of temperature and humidity and what it is to keep a subarid species. And then in a couple of years, you can get yourself an Aki. Like you say, they either go, oh, wow, beardies are really cool, or they go, well, I don't want this. It gets pushed to the wayside. It ends up in a rehome, rather than just going, look, come back to me in 6 months once you've research these questions, these topics, or whatever, and then I'll sell you the Aki as an argument's sake. Because, like you say, if you want to put in that work and prove that you can do that step up, and again, it's a hard one because if a 6-year-old wants to start off with an Aki and the parents don't care for reptiles, then it's like it's probably a bad idea. And I'm pro kids having pets as long as the parents are willing to get involved. So something like a leopard gecko or something a bit more simple. So there are blurred lines, aren't there? But I agree 100% with all the stuff that you were saying, for sure.
Yeah, it's a hard topic, and I know that a lot of people struggle with it here, like struggle to understand why it has to be like that. And yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I know it's there to protect people, because otherwise people will be running around with lace monitors everywhere.
Yeah,
and having something like that's a weapon. Especially to somebody that hasn't put in the proper time and attention to detail into how to keep it.
Yeah, it's like you say though. If for like the mangrove monitors, like I keep mangroves. I've kept Akis for quite a bit now. They didn't even get me close to ready for like what, you know what I mean? Like I'll be honest, I went into an adult female mangrove that was fairly small. So 26 inches when I got her total length. And she, still to this day, she'd try and take your finger off the second you look at her. And I was not prepared for that. Like, without having a mentor, there's the only way to experience that and learn that is to do it. But no, I don't think anything could have prepared me for it, if I'm honest, because I was already keeping a few bits and bobs, and I've been keeping for 5, 6, 7 years, had experience with bigger monitors, and I was just all of a sudden like, whoa, this is a different ball game, So it is a hard one to prepare people sometimes without having, because I never had a mentor. I've got a lot of people now that I'm tapped into that I can talk to, but I had no one to go, right, this is how to do this. And I think sometimes that can fall by the wayside. People don't realize how severe, and for example, a green tree python is, just to go off the start. And they, at least over here, without the licensing for the pro side, you can go and buy whatever you want. For example, Nyan monitors are rife here. In a year, you've got a 3-foot lizard that's a demon, and you're like, I don't want it. And then they just get thrown to the wayside. So I can see both sides.
Yeah. That's the lace monitors here.
Are they fairly common? Obviously, I don't know. I'm assuming they're fairly common.
Yeah, so they're super common and they're super cheap. So pretty much once a year, you'll see everybody kind of selling on 3-foot lace monitor sort of thing. Like once they kind of hit that size where it's kind of like, okay, this thing's actually scaring me, or I can't house it properly, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. They're a $200 lizard here.
Oh, really? Damn. Yeah. They're like 10 grand here.
Yeah. So I know overseas, like the UK and the US and stuff, they're a high ticket item. So, usually the people that are getting them are people that are actually into them for the right reasons, potentially. I mean, there's a lot of idiots with money too, but at the same time, over here, that's just, that's an easy lizard to pick up. So it's kind of a sad thing, really.
Just on that then, because I can say my opinion. For example, I've preached, I know you guys obviously don't have the Nyan monitors, but Nyan monitors over here get imported by I don't know the number, so I'm going to say thousands, but I don't know the number. And you don't see thousands of adult Nyan monitors. They just don't exist. So it leads me to assume that these animals aren't making it to adulthood for whatever reason. And then next year rolls around and the pet shops are selling £85 6-foot demon lizards that are cute as a button. What do you think can be done to try and stop that, or do you think it's too far gone? For example, the laces. Well, just as a general, for you guys, obviously, you'd probably be speaking about laces. Yeah. Obviously, you have your licensing, obviously. But, do you think there's a way to avoid people ending up with these stupid animals? I guess is the better question.
I don't think so. I think, you know, money talks, and if somebody needs to move something on, and if they're an irresponsible seller or whatever, they're just going to sell it to, you know, whoever to cover their own. You know, like, I think most of the people that are breeding Lacey's properly and stuff in Australia are doing their due diligence to be able to sell them to people that are coming across as competent and, you know, saying all the right things in that at least. But yeah, I don't know. That's a hard one. Like, I think people are always going to find a way around that. I don't think there's necessarily a fix.
No, so I agree, and this sort of brings us into the similar to the next topic. I think a big tool that could be used is social media. A lot of people, for example, I don't want to talk for yourself, so I'm going to make an assumption, and please feel free to call me a twat. So you obviously haven't got lace, so it's not your place to go, don't buy lace, guys, and I don't have Niles, so it's not my place to go, don't buy Niles, guys, because that's not our fields of expertise. Do you think people that keep and breed, in the case of Niles, not breed, but for the Lacies, do you think they have more of a responsibility to go on social to be like, hey guys, this is really what it takes, like I try and do for mangroves? Or do you think it's not down to the seller, it's down to the buyer?
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. But I mean, I think if you're selling an animal, you have to have, you have to back yourself with education on that species to be able to really inform people what it takes. But at the same time, you know, you'd hope that a buyer would be educating themselves prior to buying an animal to know what they're really in for, you know. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. I've made plenty of kind of spur of the moment decisions and bought animals that are very irresponsible. My mangrove was one of them. You know, but in saying that, you know, I think if you are a big time Lacey breeder or something like that, you do have a lot of responsibility there to go, you know, these animals require huge spaces, lots of heat, lots of food and variety of food. You know, you just can't just feed them just chicken necks or something like that. You know, you want to be giving them whole body prey items and, you know, access to, you know, natural sunlight if possible, you know, things like this that are really important for big lizards. You know, like big lizards are a different game. Like, I think that's, you know, I can appreciate big lizards. I'd love to be able to keep big lizards one day, but at the same time, they're a different kettle of fish to a beardy or an Aki or a Gilleni or something like that. Definitely a class above.
Yeah, and I know you're from, well, I say I know from watching your videos, your mangrove was a decent size, bigger than my one. But even a lizard that's, because like when we think of Akis, we go, oh, it's a 2-foot lizard. But a 2-foot lizard in comparison to a 2.5-foot mangrove, my 2.5-foot mangrove would eat my 2-foot Aki. Like, they're different. People see 2-foot. It's like when you have, for example, like a blood python or like a gaboon viper or something like that. Like, oh, it's only a 5-foot snake, but it's like a 5-foot snake. Whereas a corn snake is a 5-foot snake, but it's a 5-foot snake. So there's nuance to sizes. And I think beginner keepers, just go, oh, 2 foot's not too bad. Or 3 foot's not too bad. And then there's a difference between like a 2-foot quite big male bearded dragon or a big male Aki in comparison to like a mangrove. So on the social media front, what was like, because I know you've been doing it a while now, what was your sort of intentions behind it when you started and how have they changed?
So I can blame Cooper for this because Cooper came around to my joint and he was basically like, you've got a pretty cool, you know, group of animals or whatever. I'd love to film it. And then I suppose like after having him film my stuff, I realized that people were actually interested in what I had going on. I didn't really think much of it. I kind of was just like, oh, maybe I'll just post a few videos here and there about what I'm doing, you know, whether it's just building something or animal eating or whatever. Like, I've still left all those original videos up there. So it's, you know, pretty boring to watch if you go back 200 odd videos ago. But yeah, I never really thought much of it. I suppose I've always been like a bit of a DIYer. So, you know, I've always liked to tinker around, and I find if I'm not doing something, I get bored. So, you know, as simple as something as, you know, building a fake rock or, you know, doing whatever in an enclosure, like that keeps me entertained for a week or so. So you know, I was just filming processes like that and didn't really think much of it. I kind of noticed that there wasn't too many Australian YouTubers in the reptile scene. So, you know, Cooper was pretty much it. You know, we had Beta Birch and stuff doing a fair few videos back then as well. A few others kind of cropping up and dropping off here and there. So, yeah, I didn't really take it too far. But nowadays, like, it's definitely, I don't know, I think as I've developed as a keeper myself, which we'll probably delve into more, I think now for me, I'm trying to push a bit of a message of like, just better care for your animals all around, trying to give them a bit more than, sorry, I just saw Coop's comment.
Yeah, you mentioned them. They just show up. Here they are.
Yeah, no, he's coming over on Tuesday to hang out, so it'll be good to see him there. Yeah, so, you know, it's just one of those things that nowadays I'm just trying to push a little bit further for better care of animals, and I don't know, just kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit too, to kind of see, like, I've come so far as a keeper. I can look back at like Coop's video and go, that's bloody horrible how I was doing that, or whatever, you know, like, you're, as you said earlier, I think just to myself, you're always your worst critic, and that can't be any truer. You know, that's something that rings so true with me. And even now, like, even with what I've got now, like, everyone looks at this room, or, you know, quite a few people look at this room and go, this is pretty amazing. To me, I'm like, I've got plans for like so much further down that I'm just like, nah, this is crap. I want to push this. I want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. My brain never stops. I think you can kind of relate to that.
I was about to say, my friend Michael, he's like pretty much my best friend in the reptile hobby. So this guy here, he came to so I don't know if you know the layout of Scotland, but basically England, Scotland's at the very top of the country. Obviously we're tiny compared to you, but Scotland's at the very, very top, and I live at the pretty much the very, very bottom. So he couldn't be farther away from me if he tried, within reason. And he came to my house in March because we went to a reptile convention. He stayed at my house and drove up to the like a convention thing. And he walked into my room, and the first thing he said was, it's like a pet shop, as in, like, it's just, there's so much. Like, because obviously videos are one thing, but when you see it in person. And I'm like, yeah, but this is terrible, and I need to upgrade this, and this enclosure is tiny for Mango. This is before she got the upgrade. And he was like, Paul, that's a massive enclosure for Mango. And I was like, no. And I've had a couple of other people come here, and they're like, oh my God, and I'm like, it's disgusting. Take your kind words and leave. And that's not me trying to be a twat. That's just genuinely how my head is. And yeah, I don't know how we fix that, if I'm honest with you. If I find the answer, I'll message you first. But this is completely changing gears to where I want to go, but fuck it. So,
do it.
2 days ago, I watched Mango climb from the bottom of her enclosure to the very top. I was just sat in my room, and so she pretty much climbed up a 6-foot branch and climbed on the being on the top. And most people, I assume, would have gone, oh my God, that's so sick to watch her climb up this big cage. And I went, this cage is fucking tiny, and I fucking hate myself, and I'm a piece of shit, and this lizard deserves so much fucking better, and I'm going to sell all my fucking mangroves, right? This is how my head's going, okay? And I haven't told anybody this yet, so I'm airing this out on the internet. I haven't even told, like, my mates in the group chat. Like, Fee doesn't even know this. So this is all happening in my head, and I think I was quite stressed because this was the day before I was having my operation on my private part. So I was just in my head anyway. And I was like, I'm fucking selling every mangrove. All these mangroves are being fucking sold. And I'm just going to build a fucking 16-foot long enclosure, 8 foot tall, 6 foot deep for Mango. And I'm proper swelling in my head about this. And then I'm going, but Paul, you wanted to breed mangroves. And then I go, this is literally what's happening in my head. It's like, Paul, you want to breed mangroves? And then my brain goes, no, you piece of shit. No one in the UK is going to buy fucking mangroves. You don't need to fucking breed mangroves. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm just happy having my one mangrove. I was happy with just my one mangrove. And if I sold my other 5, I could have loads of space for Mango. And then I could put my tree monitors in a fucking massive enclosure, and they would be super happy. And then I could put my Ackies in a fucking massive enclosure, and my Gilleni, and then that's that. And I have 4 enclosures that are huge, and I'm so happy. And then I'm like, but Paul, you always end up buying something new. So clearly you like being surrounded by animals, even though I am downsizing. And then this is like the good side of my brain. It's like, Paul, you know, and you really want to try and breed, and you can hold on to a piece, because the connection I have with my mangrove is like nothing I've ever experienced. You can have a piece of mango forever. But then I'm like, well, then once you get one egg, then fuck everything else off. And then I'm like, And I just wanted to enjoy my lizard climb up a fucking piece of wood. And this is all just like... And when I say this to people, and again, I don't want to say... I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, but this is just me and my personality, who are normal. When I say this to people who just enjoy their reptiles for their reptiles, they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And exactly, poor Toad, fuck the peach throat. Peach throat can fucking go, because I can't do that bastard justice anyway. So yeah, people are like, well, what's wrong with you? And the answer to the question, and I don't know where I'm going with this point, is I don't fucking know, mate. You know?
It's... I mean, you're always, and it sounds like yourself, like you're always going to be that worst enemy of yourself because you want to strive to do better. And I think I had this epiphany of a moment, which we'll go into later, but that one time that I did get to see a wild Gilleni, and I released it into a tree, and I watched it climb and climb and climb, and it's like, fuck, this 4 foot tank's nothing. that thing's like 12 feet high.
Yeah.
How do you take that home? How do you do that? How do you do that justice in captivity? And as your friend Michael there said, like, it's never going to be big enough.
Yeah.
You know, how are you going to relate to the wild when an animal can roam so far and do so much and have so many micro habitats in that zone? You know, you can't. But what you got to try to do is, with what you've got, is give the animals the best you can, and always just try to strive to do a little bit better. That's my theory anyway.
Yeah, so I don't like mentioning names even when I'm talking positively about people, just because I don't know if they want to be brought up. But a friend of yours and I was speaking to about this over Instagram message, and they said to me, speaking of mangroves, they were like, look, because this was after Ricky Mack just released that video of the Chlorosigma fucking swimming in the ocean. And I was like, you prick. Because I was like, how the fuck can I do that? Like, how can I do that? Not he's a prick for doing it. It made me feel like a prick because now I'd seen a mangrove in the wild just swimming through the fucking sea. And I was speaking to this person, and this person said to me, they were like, look, you can swim 100 meters in a 25-meter pool as long as you get to do if you're doing this, you're not swimming. But if you can swish your tail 2 or 3 times, you're swimming. Yes, you have to turn around, but you can still do 100 meters in a 25-meter pool. And don't get me wrong, that made a lot of fucking sense in my head. But I don't know if it made me feel any better, if I'm honest. Yeah.
So sometimes seeing wild animals is like your biggest downfall as well, because you're just like, you get all this like rush of ideas of what you can try to do at home and things, but then you've got to make it realistic. You know, and as you say, you know, okay, you're not doing a 100-meter pool, but if you could give them, I don't know, an 8-foot fish tank or a 6-foot fish tank or something like that, something half decent, or a pond, or, you know, something decent, you know, you're doing better than a lot of people.
Yeah, the important part, I can't read, so bear with me. The important part of this thought process is adapting and doing the best you can to give your animal the best what you have. I 100% agree. And my only caveat to this, from my personal experience, is I could give a lot more to 2 mangroves than I can 6.
Yeah.
And that's where my head is. And that applies to any species. Like, I could do, for example, let's just say, for example, I sold my Ackies. I'm not going to, I love my Ackies, but I sold my Ackies. That then gives me a footprint, because they'll be in a 6x3 footprint. So I can just put a 6x3, go 6 foot up, and all of a sudden I've got Gilleni in a 6x3x6. It's fucking massive for some Gilleni, but a 6x3x3 for some Ackies, it's not as big as the 6x3x6, for example, for Gilleni. And I'm not saying I'm going to do this. I'm just saying this is what my brain says. So I'm like, imagine having a group of Gilleni in an enclosure that people would love for a Prasinus. And my brain's like, oh my God, yeah, that would be. And I'm not trying to do it to one-up anybody. I'm just trying to shut my own brain up. But I don't think my brain will ever shut up. Yeah, I could put a Gilleni in a 10x10x4. But then, like you say, I'd watch it climb from the top to the bottom and I go, well, I'm a prick. And it doesn't. And then everyone's like, well, shut up, because you're keeping in a massive enclosure. Obviously, I'm not, but hypothetically. And then I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's just my brain. And this is the problem when I speak about this sort of stuff, I worry, because I voice this quite regularly. I worry I come across as like one of these people that are like, I don't know, sitting in a Lamborghini, like, oh, I hate being poor. You know, I feel like I come across as one of those people. And I don't want to, because I'm just messed up. And I know I'm messed up. And like I say, I have these realizations probably monthly where I'm like, right, I'm going to do this because it will benefit the lesser and make the lesser happier. And then I probably have this thing online where people are like, oh, Paul just got Kims at the start of the year, but now he's selling them. Paul's a prick, Paul's this. But the reality is I'm like, someone else can do those Kims justice and I can do someone else better justice. And it's like, I don't know where I draw my lines. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. It's a messy
hard.
landscape.
It is hard. You know, like I kind of had to make some hard calls recently and decided to get rid of all my geckos just so I could give some other animals here better space, new cages, you know, just kind of open things up a little bit and give them more time. You know, it's sometimes you got to make those calls, and it's what's going to work for you isn't necessarily going to be working for somebody else, but you've got to learn to work within your means. And, you know,
so all keepers should constantly be evolving their thought processes and upgrading their animal enclosures, watching and learning from the animals and upgrading to tech to improve their habitat. So I've got a friend that has some frilled dragons and he puts them in a massive enclosure and they don't seem to do fuck all. And then puts them in a big enclosure, but a smaller enclosure. And they're active, they're climbing around, they're jumping around, they're doing bits. And it's like that almost goes against the grain of bigger is better because he's tried both and the animals seem to react betterly to still an adequate size enclosure, but a smaller enclosure. So in an instance like that, you can overcome and adapt. But I think when you get into the varanids, where no matter where you fucking put them, they're doing something, then it almost, because I know you have a frilly as well, so maybe you can sort of elaborate on that in a different nuance. But I find with the monitors that they never stop. Like with my beardie, sometimes half a day she's sat in one spot doing nothing, and I'm like, okay, this is fine. But with the monitors, I'm like, oh, fucking, and it's like, well, where do you stop? You know?
Yeah, frillies are one of those ones that I've only got the one nowadays. I did have a pair originally. I'd love to give him more space. Coming back from the Northern Territory with Tyson, I wanted to give him more space, but my wife kind of outvoted me on something. So,
yeah.
But you know, I don't know. I don't know what they would be like or what he'd be like with more space. He's pretty active in his enclosure as is. But frillies are also one of those animals. I don't find they do a heck of a lot unless there's something to motivate them anyway. So, you know, food's a great motivator for him. He'll jump out of his tree and do whatever he wants to do. But other than that, he seems quite, and that could just be my thought on it. He seems quite content just hanging out. But I would love to give him, you know, a floor-to-ceiling enclosure that's 8 foot wide or whatever. But as you say, you know, if your mate's tried something similar and it could just be his lizards, like they might just sit there all day and not use it. Yeah. Whereas, you know, if you had like a pair of Scalaris and something monstrous like that, they probably are running around the whole bloody thing.
Yeah. So how do you get to a place? Because you sound similar to me in the brain, so you might not even have an answer to this question because I know I don't. But how do you get to a place where you go, this is okay for now? Like, what does an animal sort of have to do for you to be like, right, I can breathe for fucking 5 minutes and then we'll get back to the drawing board?
I think for me is like just seeing a lot of natural behaviors out of them, or what are deemed natural behaviors. So not necessarily breeding an animal. I'd never count that as being the animal's happy. Like these things are just trying to pass on their genetics, you know, so they're going to do that. Yeah, you know, like people are like, oh, X bred in a tub. Yeah, it's because it's probably scared it's dying and it wants to get the next lot of it out. But anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, like I like to see a lot of natural behaviors, and I try to replicate the wild as I can. It's never going to be it, but at the same time, you know, it's one of those things that I just try to. I don't know. I just try to tweak it. I just try to tweak little things, like, for instance, like I'm using automation on this room now with these power boards that I can lock into my suburb. So I've got, sunrise and sunset features on these. So they get like a very natural kind of gradient of sunlight throughout the year. I've got 2 different LED systems on all these tanks now, where I've got kind of like some really warm yellow LEDs that come on at sunrise and sunset, just to kind of mimic that sort of like dimmer time of day, as well as like 6500K LEDs. And those are all timed in with those sorts of features. So that's one thing, but a lot of keepers are still doing just the old timer, 12 on, 12 off, flick a switch, whatever. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not ripping on it. It's just me personally. I'm just going, okay, well, how can I push this a little bit further? How can I see if I can get more natural behaviors out of my lizards? Like, I was watching your podcast with Frizy a couple of days back when I was cleaning the room. You're talking about switching off your lizards and, trying not to get them to breed and stuff like that. Well, I cycle the shit out of my animals. They cool down like they're still a little bit active, but they've got minimal heat during the day. A lot of people will turn them off completely. I do turn them off for a few weeks, but now I'm kind of on the up cycle where I'm kind of starting to introduce, I think I'm at about 5 hours heat a day now instead of like 12. But yeah, like I try to cycle everything through winter, both with heat, with lighting, with feed, so I think it's awesome how many clutches of Gilleni you've got. But at the same time, I'm going, I've never got that. And I think it's because I've always been a cycler.
Yeah.
So it's like giving them that natural cycle that they would go throughout their range. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to like.
No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just on that as well. I try to cycle my stuff. I'll be hands up honest. I think I've been cycling my Audacia, my desert Audacia, my Ackies, and my. Again, I've only had Gilleni since January, so I haven't had them for a full year yet. But I think I've cycled them wrong in the sense of I would go from 14 hours on to 8 hours on. So basically what I do in the winter for majority of my species, less daylight hours. They never, ever get off, but they're going to this year. But they get less daylight hours. They get less basking period. They get a lot less food. The nighttime temperatures are a lot colder. And I don't mist any of my species as much. So even my tree monitors only get misted like once a week rather than lightly every day. My mangroves only get misted once a week. The Gilleni, I'm very new to the species because I've only had them for what we're in now, August. I've only had them for 8 months. And January, February, March, the UK is basically coming out of winter into spring. And I had them cooking. I had the heat on. I just had them set up because that's how they came. The guy who I got them from hadn't wintered them. So I didn't want to bring them into a whole new environment and just go, right, you're cold. So I kept them as they were. But they did fuck all. Like, make no mistake. I was like, these are shit lizards because they're doing nothing. And then as my room started to warm up, because obviously I've got a hot basking spot of like, I don't know exactly what it is, but like 55, 60 degrees. But the ambience in the enclosure would have been 16, 18, something like that. As my room started to kick into the 20, 22, 24, these Gilleni were all of a sudden like, what the fuck's going on then? This is great. Coming out, getting food. And I'm like, well, this is what I thought Gilleni were going to be. And now we're coming into March, April. And then May, they started to breed. And then they laid eggs for me in June. And then they laid eggs for me in July. And now they're looking like they're laying for me into August. So that's the 3 months of summer. June, July, August is our summer here. That's all we get. And then September, it starts to get colder again. And I was speaking to Frizy again about this recently. I said, as September comes in and starts to go, I am going to start ramping them down. And as we get into October, November, I'm just going to turn the halogen off. And then as we get into December, January, which is our winter, I'm just going to let them just have a little bit of UVB for like 4 hours a day for those 2 months. That's it. And then let my room drop. And that's that. And then like your video, I think the one you've literally just done with the crickets where you were like, I'm going to see if the Gilleni want the food, threw a couple in. I think it was one of your males that came out and you're like, oh, maybe I can give them a bit more food. So that's what I'm going to try and do coming into February, March, because that's what I saw them this year, sorry. They started to come out a little bit around that March time. And that was with me cooking at full heat. So it might drag out more next year because obviously I'm not going to give them full heat. So, because I have control of them now, I can start to ramp them down. And I speak to a lot of keepers nowadays, and they're all like, yeah, just cut them, call them right off. And I think, again, me as a novice for brewmating, if we're going to call it that, because I've never done it, I, like most people, probably go, well, what do you mean I want to turn the halogen off of a monitor? Are you crazy?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's just having that, almost like the balls. Funny if you know what's wrong with me, but it's almost having the balls to have that step just to go, right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen to the keepers that are more experienced than me, that have had more success, because I don't deem breeding as success. Same as you. I don't. People go, wow, you got I don't deem that as success. Happy, healthy, active lizards exhibiting natural behaviors to me is what I want to achieve. So if in the wild they go cold and they go dormant, then best believe that's what we're doing this winter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, 100%. Like their range gets freezing overnight. You know, especially in winter, not in summer. But you know, it's one of those things. You know, like a lot of people do cook Odatria year round, and they pump out eggs and you know deem that as successful, and it is in one way if you wanted to reproduce an animal. But you know, I think as Roslage and Reptiles there said, you know, he's kind of said, you know, that they're potentially going to have a shorter lifespan because of, you know, you're burning them all the time, you know, and as Frizy said, 6 weeks minimum, switching the lights off, you know, he lives in the desert. He probably knows more than most, you know, he does experience that cold of -4 or whatever he was saying the other day on that podcast. You know, it's one of those things that these animals are exposed to this. Sure, it might heat up during the day, but at the same time, it's, you know, a shorter window. It just depends on what you want to do. You know, if you want to pump out 1,000 lizards, if you cook them and keep throwing them food, that's, you know, more power to you. For me, I want to see a captive, healthy little population that I can just kind of, you know, get my own few babies growing up just in case the next generation's dropping off or whatever. But I want them all to thrive. I want them all to be as good as they can be and have the best life that they can be. And cool down's not going to hurt them.
No.
You know, just don't go from one to the other, like you say. You know, at least you've got your plan of how you're going to step it down, or you know what you're going to do. Like,
that's the plan. Because like it's similar to what basically I'm going to try and do. What pretty much you're doing now is I'm going to just replicate the sunlight hours of the UK. So I don't know it exactly, but roughly from December, mid-October through to, I would probably say February, we only really get sunlight from, as in sun, not sunrise, sunset, but sun from probably 9 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. So you're talking like 6 hours, 7 hours. And that obviously changes. There's one point in the UK where you literally, you wake up in the morning, it's pitch black. You get home, it's pitch black. Like, because we just have that like photo period. And then the summer, some days we've got 15 hours of sunlight. Obviously that's including sunrise, sunset, but I think I'm just going to run my lizards like that and give them that 3 to 4 months of summer, so that June, July, August, and then start to ramp down in September. And then as many clutches as they give me in that 3 months is as many clutches as they give me. If they give me 1, cool. If they give me none, cool. If they give me 6, I don't really want that, but just, you know, I just want to give them a window in the wild, what they'd have. Hot, there you go. Cold, there you go. 3 months ramping up to hot, 3 months ramping down to cold. I do it with my mangroves, and I've had great success. She lays regular eggs, so clearly something is in that, because a lot of people can't get eggs from mangroves planned. Like they either go, oh, I have eggs, or they go, I didn't know my lizard was gravid, or whatever the case may be. Whereas I seem to have figured that out, and I test a lot of that to the cycling. I don't think it's anything in particular. I think it's because I take her through a winter, a spring, a summer, and an autumn. She has those natural cues where they're, oh, it's starting to get a bit more warmer. Oh, it's starting to get a bit more humid. Oh, there's a bit more food. I got what I need to lay eggs. And people are like, oh, why are you making her have so many clutches? I have no male. I don't need to have eggs from a mangrove. She just lays eggs as a byproduct of my keeping, I think. So, yeah.
With your light cycling and stuff, have you ever thought to kind of try to mimic what we've got here in Australia? Like, are you doing individual tanks, or is it like a room set up that you've got everything on the same light cycle?
So I will be doing individual setups, but the problem is my room is a sunroom, so it's all glass. So I can't escape the UK's. So, for example, my lights don't come on until, I don't know what the time is now. So my lights here at the moment, now we're in peak summer, come on at around 10:30 a.m. So when we started this, and they go off around 10:30 at night. So they're on about 12 to 13 hours at the moment. Yeah. Roughly. Each cage is slightly different, but roughly 12, 13 hours. But we have sun from, at the minute, 6:30 a.m. the sun will be up. And my room will be brightening. And then as the day comes on, then the lights start to come on a bit more to make it more intense. And then obviously the sun goes down at 9, 10 o'clock and my lights go off around 10, 10:30. But I purely do it because I'm out of the house 7 till 5 most days. So when I come home, I get home at 5 and then I have 5 till 10:30 to do my lizard stuff. So I kind of try to not fight my seasons. But at the same time, I do want to follow, going into next year, I do want my Gilleni and my Ackies to follow Australia, regardless if that means I don't see them as much in the winter months. But again, like you say, I don't just all of a sudden go, right, fuck you lot, you're off. I want to just slowly start to, because they're obviously used to what they're used to. You know, they're not idiots. They know at a rough time. I see them start to come out half an hour before the lights come on, more or less all the species. So I don't all of a sudden want to go, right, lights on at 8 today or whatever. So this winter, I'm going to make some big adjustments in my room.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah. So it's something that I need to implement. I want to do more automation because I'm not 100% on off, but I am 80% on off. And again, it's only an excuse to myself because when we moved into a bit of a rush. And I had everything on Wi-Fi timers at my old place. And I won't get into the story why we had to move in such a rush. But basically, I had to move my entire reptile collection in 24 hours. And when we moved, it was a bit of a nightmare. So when we moved into this place, everything was just sort of put. And it was like, right, you go in there, I'll deal with you later. You go in there, I'll deal with you later. You go in there, I'll deal with you later. And we didn't have any Wi-Fi at this place. And the Wi-Fi was set up like 3 weeks later. And by then, everyone was sort of doing their own thing. And my room's been chopping and changing, and I've been upgrading and downsizing and all this other stuff. And I've said to myself, which is just an excuse, and I know it is, once everyone's in a bigger enclosure, I can fully sort the electrics out and I can fully automate everyone. And I can have, for example, Indicus halogens on at X time, Indicus 2700 Kelvin LEDs on at X time, Indicus LEDs on Indicus UVB, and have everything separate. And again, I could do it now. There is no excuse. It's just pure laziness. And I've said to myself, right, future plans. But I think it does. I did a post about this on Instagram the other day. Sometimes we forget sort of where we are and we're too busy thinking of the future. And my animals right now would probably benefit from this. Whereas I'm like, oh, in the future, you guys are going to be great. But that's something I can implement now, you know?
Yeah, I mean, even if you just chip away at it, especially if you've got the timers there, or like the Wi-Fi stuff there, just chip away at it.
Luke made me get into this. This is not my doing. I wanted to just have a nice conversation and not pretend that I'm a dickhead and I hate reptiles and I'm a false fake account and I don't even want to be here. So Luke, what's your plan for your reptiles?
I don't really have a plan apart from enjoy them. You know, at the end of the day, it's one of those things that, you know, it's just part of me now. So I'd say you go.
No, I was going to say I'll be professional and I was going to bring this back. But if you've got what you're going to say on Frizzy's question, then I'm going to be professional and bring it back. And we're going to pretend the last half an hour didn't even happen.
To sum up Frizzy's question, I'd say I just need to maintain some focus and stop getting distracted by pretty lizards and kind of like really find out what I love.
That is good because that's sort of how I'm going to bring it back to this roadmap that I'm glad that I wrote down. So we sort of touched on it, but I feel like it's a good transition point because over the years, for example, you've just mentioned that you had a mangrove and bits and bobs and you started off with geckos and had a few snakes. So over the years, and as someone who's watched you and not known you, but watched you, I've seen some of the stuff that you have in your room. What do you think? We'll start this conversation off with this question. What do you think was the biggest instrumental shift from where you started to where you are now? What has changed that's got you to where you were to where you are?
To be honest, I think a lot of it has to do with herping. So for me, you know, like going out and seeing like a diamond python locally cruising around in such a large open space or hanging out of a tree or doing something like that, you know, I was bringing that home and going, you know, I've got a 6-foot diamond python in a 4B2B2 or something like that, and it can't even lie out straight. You know, how is this good for the animal? So I'd say that's how it started, is kind of seeing larger animals out in the wild and then relating that to how I was keeping them at home, or, you know, not keeping them well at home. And I was kind of shifting in myself going, this isn't right to see animals like this. And I've got like a lot of herping mates that don't keep animals at home. Some of them don't keep them because they think it's unethical, you know, or you can't provide them enough in captivity. You know, some of them may keep them down the line or something, but it's just kind of getting their perceptions on a lot of this sort of stuff as well. You know, talking to some friends that have done like some surveys on carpet pythons and diamond pythons and things like that, and kind of like, you know, animals that have trackers in them, so you can see how far they're actually moving and what sort of environments they're utilizing and stuff. And then it's like you're getting that information relayed to you and going, how do you do that justice? You know, I think there was also another few moments in particular, probably the last, I'm going to say 18 months, 2 years, something like that. I moved out of where I was. You know, I had pretty ample space in a garage to kind of do free range, whatever I wanted down there. And kind of moving into this apartment, I was kind of like, okay, well, I've got a couple of bedrooms that I can work with. And I did have kind of like 2 separate bedrooms full of reptiles, and that was all good. Then my wife gets pregnant. And you're like, I need to put a child somewhere, you know? So for me, that was probably the biggest time where I kind of turned around and looked at my collection, or, you know, my animals, and went, do I keep the big stuff and have very few animals, or do I keep the little things that I really enjoy and try to do them better? So that was probably the biggest thing for me. And, you know, like you say, you know, seeing a mangrove monitor in a 8x4 foot enclosure, well, my mangrove wasn't even in that. My mangrove was in was 7 foot by 4 foot by 3 foot, you know, and she was a 1.1 meter lizard by the end of it. Like, she was a big lizard, and, you know, she's half the length of the box. I'm going, this is wrong. Like, this is just, I love that lizard. Honestly, like, if I had the space to keep her, I would have 100% kept her. But like you say, you wanted to give Mango the biggest enclosure and all that sort of stuff. That's what I wanted to do too. But child or lizard, you know,
lizard. Don't tell anybody.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I've got that lizard tattooed on me. Like, that's how much I love that lizard. Yeah. But at the same time, I was like, this is just the stage of life I'm at now, and choices are going to be made. And yeah, unfortunately, a lot of things went to the wayside, and you know, I found some pretty dang good homes for some places. The guy that ended up taking Loki, he was actually he was a zookeeper. He's also a part-time aquarium builder that works with like monster fish tanks and stuff like that. Yeah. So he's actually got a factory in Western Sydney where he keeps his reptiles, because they need such big space, because he works with a lot of big lizards. So, you know, it's cool to kind of see different things with her. Like, he sent me a photo ages ago where she had a whole barramundi to herself, and she was just like tearing into this barramundi. And I was like, man, I never did that. You know, like, how good's that? So it's cool seeing your lizards or your animals that you had go to these sorts of places and go, they're doing it better than what I was, you know? And now I can focus on my small things and try to do them better. So, you know, all my big snakes went. I got rid of all the carpet pythons, my olive python. You know, the biggest lizard I have now is the frill neck. And as I said, I'd love to give him a bigger box, but he's also a bit of a lazy gut. So, you know, it had to shift and change. And I came from a background where I think I peaked just under about 180 animals.
Damn.
You know, that's a lot of lizards. That's a lot of mouths to feed and stuff. It was a full-time job, like outside of my full-time job. And it becomes a chore. You don't enjoy it anymore. Like, it's not fun. And like, the whole reason we get into this is to have a bit of fun with what we're doing. And, it might be an escape or something for us to just kind of keep entertained with on the side. And, if it pays for itself as a hobby, great. If you earn a little bit of money on top, not half bad, but, that's not what it's about. It's just about kind of having that fun and learning from your animals and pushing it. So, for me, that's where I had to kind of really step back. And, I did it further again recently with getting rid of 20 geckos. Like 20 geckos isn't a lot. It doesn't take a lot of time or space or anything like that. But at the same time, I just went, you know what? If I can cut down doing a nighttime feed a couple of times a week, 3 times a week, that's time that I could be, I don't know, focusing on breeding my woody colony better to feed my existing lizards, or, spending time with my kid, or doing whatever, like it's about having that work-life balance. And, at the end of the day, the reptiles are work. As long as you enjoy them, then they're still work.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot to
kind of went on a rant.
No, it's completely fine, mate. It's great because I resonate a lot, and I think the longer people keep, or should I say, the more people get into what it is to keep. I should word it that, because time's irrelevant, because you might have this epiphany in 20 years or 2 years, but the more you get into keeping, the more that you seem to see people do like what you and I are doing. And again, rightfully or wrongfully, it doesn't matter in the eyes of the hobby. We're doing it for us, and I think people forget that sometimes. But I think I had about 100 animals at one point, from a whole range of species: inverts, snakes, lizards. I had everything. And now I have 18 animals at the moment, and I'm downsizing still, so I'm going to have less. So, and I enjoy the 18 animals exponentially more than I ever enjoyed 100. And I had such a diverse range of species when I had 100. Like, I'm talking, I had like Europlatus geckos, I had giant pythons, I had small pythons, I had frogs, I had centipedes, I had like a flavor of everything. Noah's Ark, like you say. I'm like, oh, this is cool, that's cool. And I was very guilty of doing that. Wasn't allowed reptiles as kids, and just went crazy and got loads as a young adult. And now I have one little gecko, a bearded dragon, a tortoise that's my girlfriend's, and everything outside of that is a monitor lizard, because they are my passion. That's what I figured out, that I'm a monitor guy. And it's so hard. I don't know if you've got opinions on this, but it's so hard to say to someone that's just started keeping, don't do anything that you're about to do and just do this. Like, just have 2 or 3 animals and really, really, really enjoy them. Because you can only lead a horse to water. And also, I feel like if I didn't do what I did, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am now.
100%.
So it's a hard one to like almost try and get people to do,
I'm with you there. I agree. Like, I had to go through everything to figure out what I liked. And, I can see me sticking with that long term. But at the same time, I don't think you can tell anybody to do that. You've got to let them make their own mistake.
Yeah. And
not mistake, but you got to let them do their own journey almost, and try to figure it out, because what might be for you might not be for them. And, like, I know early on I got influenced by a lot of people with like mutation morphs and like carpet pythons and blue tongues and stuff. I had an interest in that for a bit. I figured that out quickly that wasn't for me, but, that's okay. You got to do all these sorts of steps to kind of figure out where your passion is. Well, I've got a mate that lives locally, another mate that we went herping with on the NT trip, Luke Nettheim, and he was sitting down. We were both sitting down here just watching the Gillens running around doing, little crackhead Gillens things. And he turned around to me and he's like, you realize one day you're going to have nothing but this lizard. I'm like, yeah, I know. But like, it's progress. You just kind of got to learn as you go. And I can see it coming, but, whether that's next year or the year after, like, who knows?
It's, do you know what? You saying that just then gave me goosebumps, because I can see my future and I know what my future will be, but I just don't want to give in to it, because I'm like you say, let me just figure it out. Let me make sure, because once an animal's gone, it's gone. So that's like it. Just let me be sure. Like, let me don't take the mangroves away from me just yet, guys. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And also as well, I think this is a really interesting point. It's funny how 100 can quickly become 200 in breeding season. So I've got quite a lot of eggs in my incubator for people that do or do not know. And I was planning to upgrade my tree monitor enclosure. I still am. It's not happening, but I have a wall dedicated in my room, and I was like, right, that whole wall will be the tree monitor enclosure. And all of a sudden, I'll get a clutch of Gilleni, clutch of Gilleni, clutch of Ackies, clutch of Gilleni, clutch of Ackies, clutch of Gilleni, clutch of Ackies, clutch of Gilleni, clutch of Gilleni. And I'm like, where the fuck am I putting all these babies? So this wall, this whole wall that was dedicated, so the tree monitor enclosure wasn't going to be, I'm just trying to do quick maths, 4, 8, 12. Wasn't going to be 12 foot long, but it's a 12 foot long wall. Now 8 foot of that wall has been dedicated to babies. And I'm only going to have babies for, let's just say, argument's sake, 4 months of the year. Let's just say. So I now have an 8 foot by 8 foot space dedicated to just baby lizards that I may or may not have. And I'm like, well, breeding sucks, because now all of this space is gone that I could be giving to an animal that's a pet. Yeah. And I was fully aware that babies would take up space, and just having 1 or 2 clutches of Ackies now and then, easy. 4 foot enclosure on top of another enclosure, boom, baby Ackies, simple. Now actually going into breeding, and I never class myself as a breeder, but I am breeding lizards, so let's not try and get away from that. And now realizing, oh shit, I have to take space away from my existing pets who I love just to try and put a bit in my pocket. And obviously, we all do it. We all want the hobby to pay for ourselves. So let's not shy away from it. But I had that realization recently where I'm looking at this big space of wall with all these empty enclosures. And I'm like, well, this sucks, Yeah,
I had that kind of happened recently because, I didn't do as good as you with the Gilleni, but I did pretty good with the Gilleni and the Tristis this year as far as I'm concerned. And I was like, I don't even have cages for these things. So I ended up having like tubs of lizards behind the couch, not snake rack tubs, but like tubs with UV and halogens and all that sort of, all that sort of gear above them. And I was like, I can't do this next year because my son will be walking and he's going to be getting into those tubs because he's not scared of the lizards at all. So what am I going to do? And that was another reason why I kind of pushed to get rid of the geckos, is now in this room, I've actually got space for at least 2 or 3 more enclosures that I can have, temporarily up in here just for baby lizards or whatever it has to be. And I've also taken the kind of next step as well. I've actually got a shed that I put out in the courtyard, kind of going, okay, well, that's something that I could probably, utilize that space down the line should I have like an excess of baby lizards or whatever. So then it's not still taking away from my current lizards and their housing, but I've got somewhere for those babies to go. It's not hard to get burnt out on baby lizards either. Like, they require way more than adult lizards. It's a little baby Gilleni and stuff. You'll be
running around like a headless chicken, like having a baby human all over again.
Yeah. Isn't that work? Jesus Christ. Everyone said it to me and I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. Man, babies.
Mate, they suck. Like, the best and worst things that'll ever happen to you.
Yeah. I mean, they're very good time wasters, but for all the right reasons.
Yeah. This is hard because I think a lot of people, myself included, I was like, and again, not for money, who doesn't love baby Gilleni, like little bandits, like banded bandits? I'm like, oh my God, and then all of a sudden they just keep laying. And you have to be prepared. Obviously, I could just feed off the eggs. I don't have to hatch the lizards. So again, it's like crying in a Lamborghini sort of situation, isn't it? But
that's like sacrilege, mate.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. Don't worry. I'm hatching every single one. Every single Gilleni that lays here will be hatched, and I will keep them all forever. But that's the thing. It's like, okay, let's just say they don't sell. I have now a responsibility. I've brought these animals into this world. I have to house 27, potentially more Gilleni if they all hatch. And it's like, I don't want to become a keeper that closes my eyes to who I sell to. Just because, like you say, I'm trying to make a buck and I need that gone because I've got more eggs coming and I'm already aware of this. But like you say, you can't feed off the eggs. You can't do it. Ackies, maybe. The Gilleni, no. Hatch them all. And it's like, shit. And then all of a sudden, I'm not doing it yet, but I'm like, I would like to breed mangroves and I would like to breed my tree monitors. And I am getting into geckos. And Jonas said earlier, Paul's geckos is going to be 100 geckos strong. And all of a sudden, fast forward 2 years, I'm sitting on green tree monitor eggs, Aki eggs, Gilleni eggs, gecko eggs, mangrove eggs, and I'm going to go, well, fuck, and I'm going to explode. And I'm already aware of this, and yet I'm still fucking doing it. So you see what I mean? These mistakes are there to be made, and I'm already aware of them, and I don't know how to stop myself.
You just got to run the course. It's the same as me this year. I was like, I didn't hold back any Gilleni, which was massive for me. And I decided to hold back a couple of Tristas. And I'm like, I don't have space for those when those are adults. So why am I doing it? You know, I should just be finding them responsible homes now, but I've never held back Tristas. So I'm just kind of like, well, that's one thing that I want to do. I want to watch them grow for a bit. The way that I look at it is, you know, you could raise them for X amount of time, but eventually I'm going to have to get to the point where I move them on. So I'll enjoy them for now and move them on down the line, and somebody can get an advanced animal, you know, at cost of me essentially. But yeah, you can always see your own downfalls lining up in front of you. It's not hard to do that, you know. It's so more space, more time. That's what we all need.
Yeah, less animals, more enjoyment is what they say. So moving your geckos on, because obviously, like you say, that's been a recent decision.
Yeah.
I'm already aware of how hard and shit it must be. And it might be too soon for you to answer the question. But was it the right decision?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. It's not for the lack of the animals, like the love of the animals or anything themselves. I love those geckos. Like those species and stuff are awesome. I'm pretty lucky that I'm in a situation that a lot of them went back to a breeder that looked after me with a lot of those geckos, and he's a very competent breeder, and you know, he's always like, I've always got these things. I've always got these species and stuff like that. So for me, a lot of that's kind of going, okay, a lot of these species are very common. I don't know. For me, maybe I'm just going to enjoy the geckos in the wild for a while rather than in captivity. It's, yeah, I don't know. It was the best decision that I ever made, though, because that meant that I freed up all that space where I've then put these two larger tanks for, you know, they're not going to do adult Gilleni, but they'll do that kind of like 2 to 3 year old mark sort of Gilleni. So at least, you know, for time, I'll have a bit of space there. I actually joined those two tanks together as well. I've got like this little, I got a hole saw. Just did a hole in between them. So if I do want to turn it into an adult tank, it can become one tank. So I was just giving myself that option. But yeah, I enjoy it way more. I enjoy Gilleni. I enjoy I enjoy Adatria. You know, like that's my passion. So I love the geckos, but at the same time, my heart wasn't in it 100%. It was only there kind of like 90%. You know, so for now, as far as time, you know, being able to get rid of the geckos and just freeing up a couple of nights where I didn't have to feed, didn't have to do that sort of routine, it's more time.
I don't know if you relate to this, because earlier you referred to them as your collection and you changed your wording. So you might relate to this. I'm trying. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. And I'm one of the only people that I've heard say this, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks it, but I'm gonna champion it. I'm gonna run with it. I'm trying to get to a place where my reptiles are like the family dog. There is no value on the family dog. You know, like Mango to me is an invaluable animal. She will be with me forever until she dies, God willing. I'm not religious, but God, spirit, universe, powers. Please make sure I have that animal for a long time. The Kimberleys, I think Kimberley rock monitors are arguably one of the best looking monitors in the world, but I have a monetary value to them, which means I don't love them with my whole heart, if we're saying that. So I have decided to sell the Kimberley rock monitors. And that is sort of how I'm blindly finding a way through is if someone offered me X for these numbers, for these animals, I'd sell them, then they're not for me. Do you relate to that at all?
I do and I don't. Like, I definitely do, because I think there's a lot of animals here that have got so much personality to me that they're here until they're gone. You know, the geckos for me, maybe they were kind of like a bit more of that, just a monetary value, you know, thing to have. Whereas, like, obviously, like, I'm never going to get rid of my Adastria that I've got. The offspring, yes, but you know, that's just kind of comes as a bit of a byproduct of keeping them. A good byproduct, but yeah, byproduct nonetheless. But yeah, it's an addictive hobby, and I think a lot of people get kind of sucked into it as far as these animals do become a bit like stamp collecting for a lot of people, especially when you are kind of new to it. And I think in the last couple of years in particular, there has been kind of like a positive shift into a lot of people moving towards downsizing collections or you know, your reptiles, your pets, and just trying to better themselves as far as keepers go, to give their pets a lot better care. And I think the more that everybody champions that believes in it, like, the further this hobby is going to go towards a good outcome, and not, you know, 15 years ago with the walls of snake racks on Snake Bites TV type style of keeping. You know, like, who do you put on the pedestal? You know, like, do you put those kind of people on the pedestal, or you put these kind of people on the pedestal? Everyone's going to have their own opinion as to how they want to keep and who they want to follow in their kind of transitions. But yeah, it's hard because, like, you know, like, even yourself, like, let's say you're breeding your Gilleni, you're getting these babies out and stuff, even though you love your Gilleni and you're saying that they don't have a monetary value on them, their offspring will, though.
Yes, yeah.
And that they're like, so where do you draw the line?
You're not wrong. So on that, because Riddler has just said someone offered 10 million for Mango, and I'm going to be 100% real now, and people that know me know that I don't bullshit. No question, I'm not taking 10 million pound for Mango, but every single other animal in my room, including the tree monitors, would go. And that's not a lie. Like, 10 million pounds is a stupid amount of money. You want to buy my tree monitors? I would have to think about it. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh no. But Mango, she is invaluable. That one animal, she's invaluable. And I'm under no illusion I'm going to get to that place with every single animal. Having one or two, you could probably get there. But having 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15, 20, 30 animals, you're not going to get there. I'm under no illusion. And like you say, if you value these animals so much, for example, if I ever did breed Mango, I am keeping a baby at least, of course. But the other babies are still, if we're calling it family, my grandchildren, I'm valuing my grandchildren. I'm going to put a number on their head and they're going to go off to places that I may or may not know. And I don't know if I'm okay with that. As I said earlier, I don't want to be that keeper that closes my eyes and goes, yep, £500, here you go, just take the lizard, or whatever the case may be. I don't want to be that keeper, but especially when you get into stuff like mangroves where they may not have a home, I think I might have to become that person, and I don't want to be. So it's like, because I say this a lot when I do my mental health stuff and my spirituality and my stuff like that. For the longest of times, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you have an Everest, a peak in your head. And for example, the longest of times, my peak was breeding mangroves. Normally, you get to the peak, so I breed the mangroves, and you go, well, I'm unfulfilled. What's next?
Yeah.
Athletes happens all the time, and like Olympic gold medalists, they find no purpose. Like Tyson Fury became heavyweight champion of the world. Boom, depression. You know, because you have this, and you have this epiphany in life where you realize that you weren't walking to the peak; you were being dragged by your ambition. And I sit with myself every day and I try and think about what's going on in my head to try and calm myself down and weed out these thoughts. And a thought I keep coming back to at the minute is, you don't want to breed mangroves. You just want mango. You just want a piece of mango. You're not trying to be, for example, Kai Fan in America, who's like, I'm pretty sure he's the world's biggest mangrove breeder. And I've got a lot of time for Kai. I'm just saying he is probably who I would compare myself to for the UK version. I wanted to be that, like the breeder, the mangrove breeder. And again, this is the first time we're hashing this out. I'm talking about mangroves. Friday, if I see anything from you, me and you are no longer friends. But basically, I'll round up my point. If all of a sudden I go, do you know what? I made a mistake. That's not my peak. And that's just me evolving and growing as a keeper. And a couple of the mangroves I have here I really adore, but 3 of them I have no emotional connection to because I never fucking see them. So I could probably rehome those animals tomorrow. Then you take this thing of like, but Paul, you're the mangrove guy. But I'm not. I'm mango guy. And you guys have made me the mangrove guy. You see what I'm saying?
But there's no harm in backtracking.
No.
You know, if at the end of the day you turn around, and whether that's to your audience or to yourself, and you get real with yourself and you kind of go, I'm not the mangrove guy. I thought I was going to be the mangrove guy, but I am the mango guy. And what can I give mango? A great life, a huge enclosure, all this enrichment and things. And then you can inform the public on how you can do those sorts of things with a larger lizard. Because you're right, you're going to, well, I mean, I'm speaking from an Australian audience, being, you know, seeing the mangroves down here and how they get kind of chopped and sold around and stuff. It's not too far off the lace monitor issue, you know, because they don't necessarily all make great captives. There's not a lot of good mangroves out there.
No.
So, you know, how do you sell that to somebody confidently?
You don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, you've got to kind of draw a line in the sand somewhere and go, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to be the guy known as the guy that loves mangrove monitors, and he's got 1 or 2 or maybe 3, and he gives them everything? Or do you have to have, how many you got? 6, 7,
6,
something like that?
6, yeah.
That's fucking ridiculous. I'll say it. That's fucking ridiculous.
Let me tell you why I brought 6, right? Before you keep attacking me, please.
Go on.
So the UK, we don't have mangroves here. They're very, so before we had an import come in December, and before that, to my knowledge, there was like 5 in the whole country. And that was it. We had an import come in, which was the first import. Best comment all night, Freezy. Why the fuck? We were having a nice chat.
Say his name right, mate. It's Frizy.
Yeah, I know, but I say it not purposely. Yeah, I know.
I got you back, Frizy. Don't you worry.
All right, Frizy. Yeah, anyway, there was no mangroves. And this import came in, and it was the first import in like 9 years. And I was like, I need a male. And if I get 1 or 2 and I unluck, and that speaks the truth, I get the Australians on and everyone fucking belittles me for goddamn mangroves. Frizy has been saying this since the day I've been speaking to him. But yeah, anyway, I needed to make sure that I had a pair. And I was like, if I get enough to make sure that I have 2.2, then I can continue to breed and I don't have to worry about, because now we've left the European Union, getting CITES animals here is really, really, really hard. So if I get a 2.2, I can continue breeding and I can have my own population of mangroves and I don't have to worry about anybody else. And I could keep 4 mangroves in my, because the plan was 2.2, that was the plan. So I could keep 4 mangroves in my room. I would have to sell a couple of other species, but I could keep 4 mangroves in my room in bigger than what mango is in, because my room's big enough to do that. Admittedly, I would have to sell a lot of other stuff. So in December time, it was like, oh, mangroves are coming in, because I'd had this mangrove for 3 years, Mango, and I'm so enamored with her and I love her so much. And I was worried at the time, but what happens if it's not the species, it's just the individual that I'm so in love with, you know? But I didn't know, because I'd never ever had a mangrove before, and they weren't here, so I couldn't chop and change it. And I don't regret buying them. Like we said earlier, you have to do what you have to do to get to where you are. And I don't, Paul, shit, fuck's sake, this turned into a roast. You fucking fucked a lot of you. But yeah, like I say, I don't know what my Everest is. And I think a lot of people for example, with the geckos, you could have, like I'm almost doing with the mangroves, bury your head in the sand and be like, it'll be fine, or just keep swimming. But sometimes you do have to make those harder decisions to better the rest of your life and your animals' lives. But like I say, I think I've realised that the Everest isn't what I want before I've got to the peak, and it almost feels like that I've fallen off the edge of the mountain rather than got to where I wanted to get to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we never have 100% plans that are like set in stone, right? Like, I thought for years, I was like, oh, I really love these Stimson's pythons. I'm just going to breed buttloads of Stimson's pythons, and I did it, and I couldn't sell the fucking things because everybody was breeding buttloads of Stimson's pythons, and I was like, okay, well, you know, it's not necessarily about the keeping and the selling and all this sort of stuff. I still have a Stimson's python. I still got my first snake, but at the same time, it's trying to figure out where you want to go and what you want to do. I think you're in a pickle because you're working with a large species that's not necessarily, nice. They're not all great captives.
They're all shit. Yeah.
And they're going to be hard to move on to good homes. So you've kind of got like this trifecta of things working against you, right? In a sense. And
yeah, you're not wrong.
Each to their own.
You're not wrong, mate. You're not wrong.
Then I'll argue my point for Gilleni, which you've already said a billion times. Like, I'm just using this as an example because this is kind of like my jam. Small species, more people can keep it and feed it and house it and do everything adequately.
And do it well.
Great captives, they're legitimately a good lizard. Like, as far as the little monitor's concerned, they got a lot of personality in a little package and they're like pretty great. Are you going to be able to find better homes for that? You know, you know, you still have to find a good home. I think that's regardless of the species. But
it's a much bigger audience.
It's a much bigger audience. You open that up completely because not everybody, and especially in the UK, you know, I know how jam-packed you guys are over there. Not everyone's going to have space for a giant mangrove tank.
No, they don't.
And they'll probably, you know, spur of the moment purchase it like I did mine and then realise,
fuck,
you know, you move somewhere else or whatever and you go, I can't give this animal what I get. You have to find somebody else to take it on. So, yeah.
Yes. The problem is, Michael, as I've said to you privately, the whole demand for the UK market, because obviously these mangroves came in December. There's been no mangroves in the country for 9 years import. And like you say, people go, this is fucking cool. No one has realized yet, 2 years down the line, how much, I'm not going to say the C word, how much of a C word they are.
Yeah.
Because they're tiny little babies. Yeah, like I say, I'm fully aware.
I get where you're coming from though, because it's like that's a unique thing for you guys to have over there, and you want to secure that because of your love of the species. But at the same time, you almost need more people kind of in that boat.
My life is a lie, Reese. To be fair, Tyson made a good point. You pick out the male, call it Everest, as Frizy said, and then people will. But the problem is, this is the roast of Paul's monitors. I don't know 4 people to give my mangroves to.
Well, then you've already fucked up.
I know. Jesus Christ. I know. You haven't got to tell me. This is what I'm saying. Like 2 days ago, I had this epiphany. I know. Okay. This is why I don't air it. I know. This is the problem. And I like to voice these sorts of things because I want people.
It's good. It's good to chat about it too because like somebody might be in the same boat here. Yeah.
Or thinking about doing it with, I don't fucking know. Someone might think it's a great idea to start breeding savannah monitors or something. There was a guy in the UK that did it well and did it really well. No one fucking brought his babies. So he kept his adults, doesn't bother breeding them anymore because 200,000 savannah monitors come into the UK every year and they obviously all go somewhere. One guy was doing it really well and captive breeding them and no fucker supported him. So he stopped breeding. So if someone is contemplating trying to do this, this is why I do want to voice it because we as people fuck up and we think we have great ideas and we realize that our great ideas are shit ideas. And it doesn't take away from how much I love the species Indicus. It's just more of a reality check of, for example, Gilleni, I could give a lot more space to. I enjoy arguably as much, and I can have, if I want to, I don't want to have loads, but if I wanted to, I could have loads. 6 Gilleni compared to 6 mangroves, I could have a lot more fucking real estate in my reptile room, like left over, you know?
Yeah. And they're not costing you as much electricity or food or time. Don't have to change fucking water. Not more, fish tank water.
Yeah, every fucking,
Oh, man, that sucks.
It does
that
suck.
sucks. And as soon as you do it and there's a huge floater in it, you're like, I hate mangroves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, anyway, moving swiftly on from this annihilation of Paul's hopes and fucking dreams.
Sorry.
That's fine, mate.
That's not just me. Everybody in the comments is doing it too, so I don't feel so bad.
The thing is, like I say, I will move on from it because Friday doesn't like me talking about mangroves, and he's happy now. But I like, again, like I said to you, either at the start of this podcast or off it, I like to be authentic. I want to be myself. I have no wishes to hide how I feel, because there may only be one person in the world that watches this that relates, but I might be able to help that one person from learning from how much I fucked up. Because like I say, I can house them. The plan was always 2.2. The plan was never 6, but I wanted to guarantee my sexes. I wanted to raise the animals myself rather than trying to find an adult that's been fucking pounded rats for 2 years.
Yeah.
So the intentions were pure, let's put it that way. But the realization came too late. And again, I am not going to have a pair of mangroves. I will still have at least 2, 100%. They're not going anywhere for me. They are arguably my favorite species, but it's one of those things. But like I said, I just wanted to voice it because I do want to help people. I don't want to sit here and try and pretend, like you say about that pedestal thing. I fucking love that, because some people do put me on a pedestal, rightly or wrongly. I've had people message me going, I fucking really look up to you. And like we sort of spoke about off air, and I'm a nobody, I'm just a guy. So I almost feel like with the social media bringing it back, you almost have this responsibility of justice. Because, for example, a video you put out today in 2 years could be a load of shit, in a sense of care and technology. And that's a completely different ballgame. But there are some people out there that put stuff out there and they go, oh yeah, AKA monitors, 35-degree basking spot, great, and there's a big responsibility for being a social media creator. And I don't know about you, but I feel it quite a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think the more and more you get feedback, like, I don't know how you feel about it, but I get feedback that sort of pushes me in the direction of like bettering keeping or trying to better my keeping. And I like to kind of be somewhat open like yourself and kind of go, my tanks 5 years ago was shit. That was crap. I was keeping Ackies in a small box or whatever it might be. Like, I'm happy to rip on myself for that sort of stuff because that's us developing. And if we can show that development, even if somebody at home is going through that same development themselves and they might not be doing things, or, they think they're doing things adequately now. And if they can kind of progress themselves through, then, we've helped that. Like, I've had people turn around and go, this tank inspired me to do this for insert species here or whatever. And I go, that's fucking fantastic. I never thought I was going to be somebody to be able to do that. But if I can help somebody down the line to do that, then why not? But yes, it does bear on your shoulders sometimes to kind of go, well, how can I do this better? Because I need to push it to help other people push it, or, it can be tough. And I find one of the biggest things that people kind of might take for granted about something, especially like YouTube, it's a fuckload of work. Like, and you're not getting paid big bucks for it. Like, I'll be honest, with my YouTube and Patreon combined, I do get a few $100s a month, which goes straight back into electricity and crickets and God, what else I need, light globes, whatever. But the amount of hours that I'd spend to make, let's just say, 4 videos for that month to put out, and I could go and deliver pizzas on the side or something and earn way more.
Yeah.
So it's a love thing to be able to, inspire other people to be able to do better for their animals. But I think a lot of people take it for granted as somebody that makes social media or you know, YouTube videos or something like that. Like, hey, where's your videos? You know, you've had a couple of weeks off or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Man, you can burn out doing this quick. You know, like, but yes, the weight on your shoulders as far as, you know, being somebody to look up to, it becomes a reality. Because I never thought I was going to be that. I just thought I was going to be the guy tinkering around, maybe with like 200 subs or something like that you all know.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it grows, you know, like it's a bit of its own beast.
I had, so two things spring to my mind instantly, and everyone will be happy to know nothing is to do with mangroves. So recently I posted a video of my male Aki. He's basically in a shed and his back's all torn up and I'm just picking a few bits off. And I had a couple of, that video did all right, got like 40,000 views on Instagram. You know, that's a lot more than I normally get. I average between, I don't know, 5 and 10,000, something like that.
That's
so
crazy.
This video, yeah, it's gone mad, and we spoke about this a bit anyway, but this video hit 40,000 views in a short period of time. So obviously you get the comments of, you shouldn't peel reptile skin. And I replied to a couple of like, you're 100% right if an animal's not ready to shed, but what's the difference between me picking it off or it falling off in the enclosure in 2 days? And don't pick reptile skin. This is this blanket term that we tell to all new keepers. So then when someone sees someone doing it, you get, it's not hate, but you get these criticizing comments, and I'm getting better at ignoring them. And I'm not ashamed of criticism. I love people telling me when I'm doing wrong so I can better myself and my animals' lives. So I'm not trying to say that. But what I'm trying to say is something that I know is not hurting or affecting my animal for just a light-hearted 2-second Instagram video to get hate. And I struggle with mental health and I struggle with self-criticism. So then I start to fall down this hole of, oh, should I have done that? Is this wrong? Am I putting a bad image out there? And blah, 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 blah. But then you get the other side of someone recently got officially diagnosed with ADHD purely because I was the only person that they watch that speaks about it. So the two evils are there, and I am deeply grateful that I was able to help that person get a diagnosis with something that I've struggled with for so long. But sadly, the reality is I forget that because some prick is telling me I can't pull shed of a fucking Aki. And that's for me where I kind of draw my line, because those silly little comments are almost enough some days to make me just knock it all on the fucking head. And people don't realize that, because it's not one person saying that, it's 50 people across different videos saying different things, that one little person. But when you're a 200 follower somebody and you're loving your lizards and everyone loves you, I remember being on, I think it was between 5 and 10,000 followers on Instagram, and life was great. You know, few interactions, few posts, people going, oh, Paul, you're great. And then all of a sudden it starts to traject up in a short period of time. And I haven't changed. I haven't grown. I'm not equipped. I haven't read how to YouTube a fucking handbook. And all of a sudden, all these people, like, the message requests daily, and people forget sometimes that Paul is just Paul. Paul is not an army and team of mangroves that are trained to use Instagram. Like, so yeah, I get the whole social media front, and it really isn't what I thought it would be, if I'm honest. I thought looking down, looking up, I was like, oh, wow, that would be great. And I didn't start this at all for money or notoriety, but it did look the life, you know, playing with animals all day, and you do this. And then when I'm at the other side now and I'm playing with animals all day, but I make fuck all money and I still work a job that I hate, I still have to deal with my child, I still have to deal with like work, I still have to be a boyfriend, I still have to clean all my animals in less time because I do YouTube now. I think a lot of people don't realize that. And I also think a lot of creators don't word it enough either.
Yeah, 100%. I can relate to that on so many different levels. Like I spoke privately about you. You know, I've been going through my own headspace issues and stuff recently, where I've kind of just gotten burnt out and all the rest of it. And that was another reason why I kind of moved a few animals on. And again, best decision I ever made. But it takes such a toll on you. And you and I have our ups and downs or whatever during different days or weeks or whatever like that. And you get some guy rip you a new one about an enclosure or something that, you know, might not be to his standard, and then you go onto his profile and all of a sudden he's keeping ball pythons in a rack or something like that, and you're like, how the fuck are you ripping me a new one?
Yeah.
But like, it's, you know, you can't let yourself sink to that level either. But when it's relentless and you're getting all these sorts of comments, and a lot of them are positive, but you do get a handful of negative or whatever in there, it's like, I'm the kind of personality that I'm like, yeah, the positive's good. Why did that guy say that? How can I stop a person saying that? And the truth is, you're never going to be able to do it. But I fixate on that.
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah, exactly what Frizy said.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you can turn around and realize that you're doing what you can do and it's the best you can do, that's all we can focus on. And trying to focus on those people that are, you know, bigger supporters and, you know, always got a positive thing to say, or, you know, look at like the little inspiration stories, you know, like I love when people send me a message. Like I don't get back to everybody. You can't. But like I love when somebody will go like, oh, I love your videos. I tried building my own background or whatever. This is what I had. It's like, that's the guy I'll respond to because I'm like, there's actual conversation there to start. It's not just like thumbs up on your channel sort of thing. It's, you know, it's actually a positive thing. And I love saying stuff like that to go and go, okay, that's why I'm doing this. That's the reason I'm doing this, is because X person's had fun building this enclosure for that animal, and now that animal's got some form of enrichment or rocks to climb or whatever it might be, you know, or you know, maybe they set up a bio tank or something like that for a gecko. But yeah, seeing that sort of positivity, that's the thing that keeps drawing me back. And like recently, I crushed my finger at work and, you know, gave it a pretty good little snap. So I've had a couple of months off because I can't do my job. There's no light duties in this job, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, now's my moment. I can really get into this room. I can reset everything, get my mindset back, get rid of these geckos that I'm not in love with as much, you know, just kind of learn it all again, reset myself, bank up a bunch of videos, which I have, you know, and just try to get back in that motion, try to get in that positive headspace again. But, you know, like you and I, our headspaces are going to fluctuate. Like some days you don't know what you're waking up with. And, you know, Jekyll or Hyde today, you know. It's,
and it takes one thing to change it, I find. Like Friday, I had a real bad breakdown at work on Friday. I don't enjoy my job at all. And I snapped. Did not, and I normally have I proper snapped, you know. And then you get, my mangrove's not eating. How do I do that? And I'm not saying don't message me, and it's no one's fault at all that I'm down. But then sometimes, like you say, you get the, oh, hey mate, where's your video? Or why haven't you replied to me yet? And in that headspace, that split 10 seconds, I just go, oh, fuck you, fuck this, fuck everyone. But then, like you say, you get a message 2 days later and it's like, hey man, I saw your video on this. I really relate. Like that ADHD video I did, in my opinion,
that was awesome.
Well, thank you very much. I was about to say, in my opinion, was one of the worst videos I ever did. I had more private messages from that video than I have had since starting this, from people messaging me going, thank you so much for putting that out there. Like, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being honest. Thank you. And I was like, well, that's fucking nice. Like, I'm getting a bit emotional now anyway. So we're going to change this subject. But I was like, that for me is why I'm doing it. It's so much more important shit than fucking peeling an Aki's skin. Like, what I can do and what I can say, and even this podcast, like, we're all taking a piss out of me and my fucking mangroves, but I guarantee somebody somewhere mentally has gone, well, I fucking relate a lot to that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna not make that mistake. And that for me, sometimes I forget it, mate, I'll be honest. Sometimes I do just go, oh, fuck this shit, I can't be bothered. And then sometimes I come back to that moment, and that's why I sit with myself every day and I ask myself, like, how am I? Am I Jackal? Am I Hyde? Am I this? And I come back to those moments of like serendipity, and I'm like, okay, this is why you're doing it, Paul. Not the fucking £2 you're making per podcast that you don't get monetized because you fucking swear, or not the fucking, you know. And the Patreon, the community of my Patreon, a few of them got together and sent me like this little care package gift, like custom sticker things, like, and sent me a bunch of leaves and shit just to say like, and sent me a fucking signed out Attenborough picture just to say like thank you and stuff like that. And
how good's that?
yeah, mate, honestly, I was near on crying, like nearly cried then, but I'm quite an emotional man, full stop. I don't try and hide it, like men cry too. But and it was all organized by one of my Patreons. And I assumed, because basically it just started off with Fee giving me my phone live on Instagram. And I was like, what the fuck is happening? I had no idea. And one of the Patreons had messaged my mate and he was like, look, I want to do this. Let's get something sorted. And it all took legs and a few people chipped in. And you remember that you're somebody to something. And again, that's also like, fuck, I need to make sure I constantly put content out because these people are relying on me. But then you also remember that these people are here for you. No, sorry, these people are here with you, not for you. So yeah, it's that's my little bit on that because I'm gonna get too emotional with that shit. But yeah, that's my little 2 cents on social media.
Oh, well said.
But yeah. Let's change gears again. Let me see if anyone has said anything because I've been ignoring you for a second. Okay, here we go. There's a question. Are you getting any more Audatria?
I'd love to have them all. I would, but no, I'm not getting any new species. There's a chance that I might get another lizard down the line, just to pair a lizard up. At the moment, no new species. I'm losing my voice.
We're all getting choked up today. This is what we get for taking the piss out of some poor guy that keeps mangroves. So I'll just see where we are on this thing so I can actually bring it back. Someone has asked me to ask you about your are they Spinifex hopping mice? Do you still have those?
Yeah.
Is that what they're called?
I don't know.
You don't have them?
Really cool animal. Yeah, Spinifex hopping mice. They're really cool animal. They're basically like a little native mouse. Mm-hmm. Kind of hop around like little kangaroos, but they're only like this big. Cute little tail with like a little fluffy bush off the end of them. Like, they're really good animals. I basically have to draw the line and go, you know what? I can't keep up with their care just because they're super messy. And as much as I love them, I just couldn't keep up with them. And that's just due to my lifestyle being so busy. Like, I've got 5 different incomes essentially that I work in different ways and shapes. And then you throw a 1-year-old baby on there and a wife and, all the other things in your life. I had to start drawing lines. So before the geckos went and before I kind of downsized that, they were probably the first thing that went before that. Great animals though. Definitely like awesome animals. I'd love to keep them again just when I got more time.
Yeah. We have guinea pigs, so not exotic mammals, but exotic mammals. And I keep looking at stuff like either like some sort of hedgehog or a tenrec or something like that. And what scares me with mammals is, like you say, with a reptile, if I try and do my waters daily, but if I do forget one day, okay. With mammals, like the 2 guinea pigs probably poo more than my entire room does in a week. Like the guinea pigs in a day probably poo more than my bloody reptiles do in a week. And it's like, Jesus Christ, like you say. So just on that, a little, it might be different because obviously I know Australia has multiple different climates anyway, but you see a lot of people, myself included in the past, go, oh, we'll get this. All of a sudden their room, because of all the vivariums they have, sits at 28 degree ambient, and they've got something like leaf-tailed geckos that want it at 22 degrees ambient. Did you ever run into that issue yourself with like not being able to? So let me word it this way: doing lots of things okay, and nothing great, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely ran into that. Even in this room when I first moved in here, it looked nothing like this. It was just basically full of exoterras and stuff. And I had, Gilleni and leaf tails and various geckos and Boyd's forest dragons, like another cool climate species. I had all sorts in here. And, nothing was going too bonkers. Some of the leaf tails were surprisingly doing pretty good and reproducing and things, but you know, there were a few things, and like the way that my place faces as well, it does get quite warm. So that was also a deciding factor for me to kind of go, well, this room gets hot regardless. These leaf tails aren't going to love that long term. So I made the call to move them onto a good mate who's actually, most of them came from anyway. But yeah, kind of hooked him up with those, and you know, set him up to hopefully have success with those in the future, because his room's all cool climate. He loves rainforest species and things like that. So, you know, that was kind of a thing for me to kind of go, you know what, that's his jam, not my jam. I love the arid interior of Australia. If somebody said, do you want to go herping at Iron Range, or do you want to go to the middle of the NT again? You know, I do want to go to Iron Range, but at the same time, I'd go back to the NT every day of the week if I could.
Yeah.
You know, I really need to get to WA. But yeah, like I think it's about maintaining focus again, you know, like that's one reason that I really did want to kind of do it. And I think that's one reason that maybe even the arid geckos that I have or had were kind of struggling, is because a lot of those during the daytime would probably be finding the microclimates that were a bit cooler than what they were actually getting here. So I never really produced many geckos. Not that that's necessarily determining success or anything like that, but you know, it's just one of those things that I was like, where do I want to go with this? And the Gilleni are never leaving. Like, that's just hard out what I'm into. And I've almost somewhat built the room around them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just one of those things.
I think a lot of people fall into that trap of I'm speaking to someone about it at the minute, and if they're watching, they know who they are. But they're almost like, oh, this is cool, that's cool, this is cool, that's cool. And I'm like, it is, but then all of a sudden your room starts to creep up, and the animal will do okay at that temperature, but you can't provide optimal. And for me, I want to get into a couple of gecko species, and it's probably because I'm up a lot at night, so I just need that little something just to tinker with my brain. And I don't want loads. We joke because I have an addictive personality, but I would like a pair of Cinctus. I have the male. I'm getting a female soon, and I would like a pair of some species of Strophoros, probably Silaris or Ciliaris, however it's pronounced. But
best group of geckos you'll ever keep, in my opinion.
Or Strophoros.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
I really want to get into them.
They're out all the time. They're always basking. They're so interactive. They'll tongue feed for you. Like, they're in your face all the time. They're not just hiding.
Let's sell the mangroves and buy the Strophoros.
Yeah.
I love them. I think they're great. And I seem to be drawn to animals that look like dragons, and just the spikes above the eyes on some species and the spikes on the tail on some species. Like, so the Silaris, is it you get the Silaris, and then Silaris, is it a Barons, isn't it? That would have the
the Barons,
Yeah, I really like those.
They're from WA, the Aberrans. They're kind of like a conjunct population, essentially, that are like a little subspecies of their own, apparently. So I'm not right across it, but yeah, they're a bit different. So, but like Ciliaris, the range of Ciliaris is huge. So I wouldn't be surprised if down the line they split that up again, because it's, you know, some of the animals that you see photos of all around Australia, you just go, how can they be the same? You know, but you know, it's like anything. You get a lot of variation in anything, you know, especially when you're talking about such a big country with so many different species that do have good range. But good geckos.
I'm definitely gonna get some. It's just a question of when. Like, and again, I want to do them justice. I want to put them in like I don't know exactly yet, but in my head I'm thinking either like a 60 wide. Oh, thank you. Oh wow, girlfriend's come and delivered drugs and drink. Medically prescribed drugs, guys. So either like a 60 wide, a 45 deep, 90 tall, or I might as well just go all out and go the 90, the 45, and the 90, and just get like a 1.2 in there, set it up like just arid, twiggy, bushy, sticky, nice hot basking spot. The rest of it can just drop to the ambient of my room so they can get their gradient where they want to be. And that excites me. And I know we're sort of coming back round, and it's the theme of this topic of downsizing, small animals do better. But the idea of having a gecko in a huge enclosure that I can make look like a slice of Australia really excites me. Whereas a 3-foot lizard that I can do okay doesn't excite me as much. The species does, but how I can keep them don't, you know? So that's
100%.
why I like Gilleni as well. Because Gilleni, they genuinely act like my tree monitors. I have Prasinus here, and the Gilleni act pretty much how my young tree monitor acted. Like, they are very close. Like, people are like, oh yeah, like mangroves are similar to tree monitor. Like, Gilleni are, if you put a bit of spray paint on them and lengthen their tail, you would probably get confused because they act just like tree monitors. And I don't know about in Australia, but they're not all that popular here. Why do you think Gilleni aren't like super booming? And they might be there, but over here they're not. So I don't know about the Australian market.
The Australian market's definitely picked up over the last few years, I'd say, because when, like, I mean, from a monetary point of view, and maybe it's a bit of COVID tax, but like they, going back when I got into them, they were like a $200 goanna, so they weren't like overly expensive. And I saw somebody selling them for $800 this year, like unsexed hatchlings. So they've gone swings and roundabouts, they've gone up, and they'll probably drop down again. But I think a lot of people, as somebody said there, they're not necessarily the most colourful. So maybe that's a big ticket item to kind of get people into the colour, and that's why a lot of people love Prasinus.
Yeah.
I don't know about Prasinus's personalities and such personally, because I can't even keep them in this state, nor do I have the money for what they're worth here in Australia. But I think maybe that's one of those things that draws people in, much like a green tree python, is it's that flashy colour. They don't want drab little grey lizards.
Yeah.
It's different strokes for different folks. It's depends on what people want. Something that I'm actually trying to work on now is potentially, and it's just an experiment, but I want to try to see if I can actually bring better colour into my Gilleni, not necessarily through breeding, but giving them access to a more varied diet, potentially feeding the insects that I feed them different sorts of food sources and things as well, so they've got more nutrients or more a wide range of nutrients, and also access to sunlight. So that's one thing that I really want to try to do now, especially now that I'm hopefully going to have a bit more time having less animals, is focus on getting things out into the sun. So I don't know if you've ever seen this book, but it's something that made me trigger it. I've got a whole stack of goanna books next to me.
I haven't seen that one, no.
So this is by a guy called Gunther Schmieder. He's unfortunately just passed away, I think, last year. But he was a terrific photographer. And there's a section on Gilleni in here where I've never seen it in any other book. And like this is like a smidge of things. I've got like a full bookshelf next to me of all sorts of reptile stuff. But in this one book, he says, wild Gilleni have yellow or tanned backs with red stripes, right? Now, I don't know about you over there, but our captives don't have that. And the other thing that he says is it's only seen in wild Gilleni and captives with access to sunlight. So this is just me openly thinking it may not even work, right? Like it could be completely cactus. But it's one thing that I want to just experiment with over potentially the next few years, just to see if I can just enhance a little bit of color in my Gilleni, like whether that's something we're missing from the sun. Because like, let's face it, a lizard in a box is not getting what a lizard outside's getting. So I just want to play around with that, and then fries these grasshoppers and things like that, just a bit of a varied diet. See if I can enhance that. But
so as far as
them being popular overseas, maybe they just haven't been given the legs yet. Maybe you need to champion them and not mangroves.
I'm trying. I post a lot. I post more about Gilleni on Instagram nowadays than I do mangroves.
That's bloody brilliant.
It may or may not be because I have 27 eggs in the incubator, but will leave me to my own manipulation tactics. But
we all do it.
Shameless plugs. All jokes aside, like generally all jokes aside, I was so excited to get them. I traded them for some Timor monitors. So I had a trio of Timors, and I traded them for the Gilleni, and I traded my Tristus for the Glauites, the Kims, and I regret trading the Tristus. I don't regret trading the Timors, but I miss my Tristus. Anyway, like I say, they clearly knew it was too cold ambience in my room as I've learned the species a little bit more. And they didn't do anything for the first few months. And I was like, these are shit. Like, I've watched a lot of your videos on Gilleni, and you're a massive inspiration for me for how passionate you were about them. Because you go YouTube, Gilleni, and not really a lot comes up. And I get a lot of your videos, and I watch a lot of your videos, and I'm like, yeah, they look so sick. They look so sick. They're so cool. They're so cool. Blah, 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 blah. And then they did nothing. They didn't come out. And I was like, oh, and again, as a novice, it's only me as a novice keeper. I didn't really realize that they weren't doing a lot because they were cold. I've figured that out now. And when they started to come into themselves, like, honestly, the first thing, and even now, the first thing I'm going to do when I go downstairs, I'm going to check the Gilleni. First thing I get in when I go to work. I don't go to the mangroves. I don't go to the tree monitors. I don't go to the girlfriend. I don't go to the Ackies. The first thing I do is, where are my Gilleni? How are my Gilleni? Like, what are my Gilleni doing? And like, you come in and you undo the door, and all of a sudden, like, 3 little heads pop out like little meerkats. Yeah. I'm like, where's the 4th one? And then you're looking around, and then there they are, and they'll hang vertically on the branches, like almost like squirrels. They'll hang upside down, right way up, and they'll be like, "What are you doing then?" I'm like, twist their heads, move their heads, but the bodies don't move like chickens. And they're like, and you're like, and then you're like, right, you want some food? And you get the little tub and you shake it up, and all of them is like, and you're like, Jesus Christ, you little fuckers. And mate, they're incredible. Like, they are everything I thought they would be and more. And like you say, they're as big as your hand. Like, and I know obviously you say you can't keep Prasinus where you are, but I've had Prasinus for 3 and a bit years. And I would genuinely, I've never had any other tree monitors, but I would genuinely liken them the closest. So I've kept Pilbarensis, I've kept Tristus, I've kept Kimberleys, I've kept Timorensis, I've kept, I'm trying to think now, Ackies, and obviously Gilleni. There's probably another species of Audacia in there. I've kept a whole bunch of the mangrove complex. I've kept like a good few species of monitors, and Gilleni are the closest thing I've found to the tree monitors in behaviors. They're not as curious as a tree monitor, I would say. A tree monitor, the second you come into the room, you're more experienced with Gilleni, so maybe you can call me on my bluff here, but the second you walk into the room, the tree monitors are like, what's fucking going on? And they'll come out and they'll come to the glass. Whereas the Gilleni are a bit more relaxed. As soon as you're in there with them, they're like, well, what's going on? And they're little ferrets. But if you walk past the room, they might just turn their heads, is what I've found with mine in my limited experience with Gilleni. But when it comes to feeding, when it comes to hunting, when it comes to like general like courtship behaviors and just behaviors and interactions, they pretty much are a dwarf Prasinus, like in more or less, obviously subtle nuances, but in a more or less roundabout way. I've seen those sort of behaviors.
I do find like a lot of their natural behavior quite interesting as well. Like, because, you know, for a small little species, I love watching the males wrestle. You know, you get a couple of males having a bit of a biffo. Like, I've got 3 young males in a tank that are all wrestling with each other because they think there's a girl nearby because they can smell girls in here, you know. But it's cool. It's cool seeing things like that with a little tiny goanna, because, you know, you can relate that to a lot of the big species like Panoptes or, you know, lace monitors and things like that. But when you got 2 little lizards this big on the exact same thing, it's like, man, you're getting everything of that big goanna, but in a tiny package that you can house better. You know, they're good little lizards like that. Even just down to like their courtship and things, and like how gentle they are with their courtship. I know you were saying that you've got a female or something that was pretty rough.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you actually, because I have a 1.3, so I can't comment on 2 males wrestling. The group was sold to me as a 2.2, but it is a 1.3. And the females wrestle. And I've got 3 proven females now, and I know they have laid, because when they lay, they look like they've been run over, and I can tell them apart, obviously. The females wrestle, and they'll wrestle, and they might nab a little bit, but not really. Yeah. And then I have 1 female who's similar size, if not slightly bigger than my male, and she chases the other 2 females, and she'll bite and shake them.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know if that's just her. I don't know if the enclosure's too small because it's fully decked out. I don't know if you've seen my Gilleni enclosure, but it's rammed with vertical, horizontal branches, corks, flats. So they got and they can get in and out of the background. Like, but yeah, for the longest of times, my smallest female wouldn't come out because the second she did, my big female would just have her. She'd probably bite and shake her. Yeah.
I haven't had that with girls before, but it's not to say it's not possible. Like it might just be one of those things where she's just such a dominant female. Maybe she just needs a tank by herself, and you know, you cycle the male through that tank or something like that, just so she can't hurt your other ones. To give you an example, like I've got, I don't even know how you talk about like 1.2s or whatever like that. We don't really do, well, as far as I'm aware, we don't do that in Australia. But I've got a male and two females, so a trio up in the top tank, and then I've got two males and a female down in the bottom tank. And so it's like a bit of a backwards thing because usually people would go, "Nah, you're not putting two males together. Like that's just psychotic." They're completely fine. Couldn't tell you who's the proven breeder in that lot, but you know they're completely fine. But I never see any sort of biffing with the females up the top. So you know I can't speak from female dominant sort of thing because I've never really had a bigger group together than 3 or 4. The males definitely I get a bit of ritual fight going on, but you know I've never seen them like chasing and biting or anything like that. Like all my lizards still have their toes and tail tips and all that sort of gear, so I haven't kind of noticed that. Not to say it won't crop up in the future. I wouldn't put it past them. It's like human personalities, right? Like you can always get a human that's just a complete asshole, and you know no matter what you do, you can't get nobody's going to get on with them, sort of thing. So maybe it's a case of separating her out and just seeing if she does okay with the male circulating through the tank or whatever, you know, when you do want to breed them. Or maybe it's a case of you just need to move her on and she's a pet only type lizard.
Yeah, basically, she's got to be moved on. She's completely fine with the male. And I've said to the guy that's getting her, she's a bit of a bitch. I think he's planning on just putting her as a pair.
Okay.
And I am holding her babies back, and because I'm never not going to be without Gilleni now. Like they're incredible. Like they're incredible. And my plan is to basically the enclosure my Prasinus is in. Once he gets that upgrade, that's going to become my Gilleni enclosure. And just put them in like a big enclosure. And I just want like a 2.2 or something like that, and just have the 2 males and 2 females in this big enclosure. And then I might have another group. I don't know yet. I don't need another group, but I might. And just have another group and just have like maybe 3 males, 3 females, ideally as unrelated as I physically can. And I can just chop and change bits and bobs as I need to. But yeah, I'm more excited about raising the babies up because I imagine, I obviously don't know, and obviously you can help me elaborate on this, but I imagine for the first few weeks they're going to be quite shy, but once they realize that you are not a threat to them, I imagine they're all as much fun as the adults.
Maybe a few days they might be a shy.
Yeah.
After that, they'll be out basking in the open in front of you.
Oh, sick. Even better then.
Yeah. They don't muck around. They're good lizards. Like they like the tristis, when you hatch those things, they just shy away. Actually, this year's right, and mine were pretty bold. But yeah, baby Gil and I are pretty bold. I wouldn't put it past them. It depends on your enclosure, but like quite often with really young baby goannas, I will tub raise them. But I kind of have like heaps of like bark or whatever down low or tiles or something like that. So it's kind of like cracked bark on a tree, just horizontal instead of being vertical. And you know they'll sit out on top of that and bask underneath the halogen lights. They're pretty bold. I don't think you're going to have an issue seeing them. Yeah,
that's the main thing then, because I'm planning. It's not done yet, but my plan is to get a couple of the 45 exoterras.
Yeah.
And then just give them backgrounds and then bark just behind it and then a couple of branches. That in my head is how I'm going to raise the babies. Yeah. And I'm raising each clutch individually because I don't want to mix, because I can then be like, this is from this female, this is from this female, I don't want to be that breeder that goes, well, they're born, because I had a clutch within 3 days, the 1st of June and then the 3rd of June. So those babies should hatch roughly around the same time. So they'd be okay to go in the same setup. but I don't want to be that guy that I'm like, I think that's her, and I think so. I'm just going to do everything separately, because then I can say to people, look, these two females are unrelated, same dad, different females. That's her, that's her. Because I have on the colors, I have a completely patternless male, like he's all silver, doesn't have a single line on him. I have one female who has jaggedy burgundy bars down her back, and she's really nice, actually. She's really pretty. And then I have the big dominant female who's more or less patternless. And then I have one that's sort of in the middle of the two. So I will be holding some babies back from my nice female. Just to sort of see the difference between the almost patternless female babies and the patterned female babies, because then I want to see if it's not a genetic thing, but if more patterned Gilleni will produce more patterned Gilleni sort of thing, and just play around with it. So I'll be keeping a couple back for sure. And I don't think I've been more excited for anything in my reptile keeping career, if we're calling that, thus far, as baby Gilleni, because I'm really loving them. I think they're great. Like, and I'm trying to tell, and again, I'm not doing it because I'm trying to sell them, because the chances are I'm holding back pretty much 2 clutches anyway. Yeah, not forever, but just to skip my sexes out, keep the nicest ones, and then probably move on some grown on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't explain really what makes them so fun, other than they just are. When you think of a monitor, if they had a longer tail, they would be the exact quintessential in my head what I would think of a monitor when I think of monitors as a non-Australian. Like, they act exactly how I'd imagine they would act, and they behave exactly how I imagine a monitor would behave, and they're like really cheeky with it as well. Like, there's a locust right there, and two of them will come over and see the male has the locust. They're like, right, fuck him, and then go for him and pull apart the locust rather than go for the one that's just right there. So in the wild, you like say you saw these Gilleni climbing up these great big massive trees. What was your biggest takeaway from finding them in the wild?
Biggest takeaway. I think for me, it was so many takeaways. Like, feeling the environment. Like, obviously we were there pretty much late summer, early autumn. So the temperatures were still hot. So it was during the middle of the day where we were kind of experiencing, I think it was like 40 or 42 degrees, like ambient temperature.
Yeah.
I was pretty lucky that Tyson brought along a temp gun and a UV meter and stuff like that, so we were able to get a bit of data on that. I think because of the time of the day that we went there, and when we saw the particular one that we saw, they were actually trying to get cool. So it was kind of, Tyson kind of put it to me. He's like, well, maybe they're grey coloured because they need to be light in colours to cool down rather than heat up, So because of the environments that they're coming from, like, it's so harsh. It's not a friendly place. Like, I actually thought like there was a chance I was going to cook there myself. Like, my brain was messed out of there. Like, yeah. But just seeing the environment, seeing how barren it can be. A lot of people, in my experience, they do, and it's nothing wrong with it. But, they'll do Gilleni in a tank, but they've got like cork bark everywhere. Layers upon layers upon layers. It's heaps of space for the Gilleni. I get it, but at the same time, you see this Gilleni in this one tree.
That's something I wanted to ask you, actually, because
there's no backgrounds behind it. There's no rock wall. There's no this, that, the other. It's pretty bare.
And do you think, obviously it's hard to know, but do you think that Gilleni, for the most part, that's my tree, that's where I'm staying? Or do you think they come down?
No. Yeah, I reckon they'd go in between trees and stuff. I reckon they're not, that secluded. But at the same time, some books and some things that I've read, in certain areas, people have kind of said, 90% of trees that they check for these things, there's a pair in it. So then that kind of makes me think, well, if in certain areas they're that abundant, then I suppose that tree could just be their tree. So in one sense, I try to do that in my own captives where I kind of only give them a few different options. There's two reasons for that. It's access to stuff that's actually aesthetically pleasing to go into my Gilleni tank, because I'm a bit of a sucker for that sort of like trying to make it look good too. Aesthetically pleasing. But it's also the fact that you go to some of these places and you go, there ain't a lot there. It's pretty sparse. Like, I was actually surprised at where we went and when we saw this one, how green it was. And that's only because they just had some rain recently, so the ground was a bit green. But yeah, there wasn't a lot going on. You're talking about like dusty cattle stations and stuff like that have bulls just tearing it up all the time.
Yeah, because that is something I wanted to ask you, because like I say, my Gilleni enclosure is elaborate. I'm not going to try and pretend that it's not. The whole background is real oak cork. A couple of bits of it have been ripped apart because one of the females had disappeared. The little female that was being bullied, and I was like, I haven't seen her. The enclosure's not smelling, but I haven't seen her, and I was worried. So I pulled the background off, and there she was, happy as Larry, like, what the fuck do you want? And I was like, motherfucker. But the background's all oak cork, and then I have, similar to how you do, it is your method, to be fair. You do the bit of wood and then you screw the wood into the bit of wood and then it goes in. Yeah. So I did that. So I have just random sticks, not hollow logs or anything, but random sticks that it's just vertical branches, and they can go between that. And then at the back, I have a couple of cork tubes, so they can sort of either wedge in behind the bark or they can come out into the open. Because in my head, they can sort of do everything then. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's a box. Like, we have to do the best we can. And it's interesting to where you find them, because sometimes you go in there and there's 4 heads behind the same piece of bark, and there's just 4 heads sticking out like that. And I'm like, and then the other times they're at the complete opposite end of the enclosures. 2 of them are just hanging on a branch, almost like a koala in my head. Just like, what do you want? And then the other ones are like hidden away, I don't know. I want to learn, and again, you only learn by changing and seeing how an animal uses its environment, but I want to learn what is best for them. So do you think, for example, let's just say my babies, let's just imagine one background at the back of the Exoterra, leave the 2 other sides, and then just 2 or 3 sticks would be ample, or would you go a bit more intense with them?
I wouldn't give them just 2 or 3 sticks. If you could make a couple of those hollows, just so they could actually, so they could actually use it and be hidden. I think that would be more ideal. Look, it's all personal preference at the end of the day. If you're giving them the space, they will use it. There's no doubt about it. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing the full cork bark everywhere type thing. This is just me just going to where they come from, seeing what they're using, and trying to bring that home as best as I can to both be functional and aesthetically pleasing. I think as far as babies go, sometimes simple is best as well, just because then they're going to be able to hit food easy. So for me personally, I'd probably just do a few hollow uprights. If you lean them against the back wall, so be it. I think in an Exoterra situation, if you do cork bark along the sides, you might run into the examples where they try to run out the tank a lot. They are escape artists, as Frizy said earlier. So I'd be very cautious of that. I'd be very cautious about the like where the cords come in at the back of the Exoterras. I'd tighten that stuff up tight. Like, even if you're pre-silicon it or something like that, just so then you can pull the silicon out if you need to use it for whatever else. But do something so they're not getting out of it. Sneaky little buggers.
So we spoke about this off air, so you already know my opinions on this. Do you recommend that I just get some big tubs, convert the lids, stick a UVB in there, drill the little, because I use similar to you, the tiny little micro halogens, the little E27 tiny micros. Do that for 6 weeks and then move them into the exos? Or do you think with a bit of common sense, the exos, I should be all right?
I think with a bit of common sense, the exos should be right. It's just, just watch them. Make sure you look around on the roof and stuff like that before you open up the tank, because half the time you got one hanging off it with one leg or something like that. So, just bit of common sense and you'll generally be fine. But yeah, just make sure it's tight. The other thing I'd say is sometimes on the exoterras, what I'll do, just so I don't lose anything, because I might get some like gaffer tape or something like, some sort of heavy tape, and just kind of tape that edge down, because you're never really going to get them coming up and through it. But just in case they manage to flex it, like, I know they're only a tiny lizard, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, so you might as well eradicate any risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've had a few animals escape. I don't know if you do or don't know this one, but I had a Prasinus escape the enclosure and get outside of my house to live in the wild for 11 days until my girlfriend found it. Yeah. No idea how to this day it happened. Like, the enclosure was, all the vents were in and the doors were closed on the enclosure. How it got out the house, I understand, because the windows were open. Paul, you can't do tubs. You'll never sleep. You're not wrong. Bingo, yeah. Again, shifting gears, because I can't be asked to get bullied even more than I already have on this podcast. How have you got to the place then with the species that you keep? Because I know you've got some Agurnia, you've got the Tristis, you've got the one Kimberly.
For now.
And obviously the Gilleni, we know the Gilleni. And then is there anything else that you're keeping at the moment? Oh, you've got your
I've still got a stack of stuff.
Yeah.
I've still got
you've got the Stimpsons, I saw. And a Beardy as well, you've got.
And a Beardy, I've got a Shingleback. I've got 6 green pythons, 2 children's pythons, 2 rough scale pythons, 2 Boyd's forest dragons, a magnificent green tree frog. If we're going through all the animals, I've got a big reef aquarium as well. And then in that shed that I got outside, I got about 200 discus. Okay. So, decided while I was bored during winter that breeding discus was a great idea. So,
Is it still a great idea, or do you regret that?
Oh, it was fun. It was a learning curve. It was something to do. Will I do it long term? No. But I've always loved the type of fish they are. So, just thought I'd give it a crack and see what was possible. Basically, the plan is anyway to just raise the discus fry up and then trade them to shops for store credit so I can buy UV bulbs and all the sorts. So, it all goes back to the reptiles.
Yeah. So, what is it about your core species outside of Gilleni, obviously? Yeah. I mean, we can elaborate into Gilleni, but what is it about them that have allowed them to stick around for you in your room?
So for the bulk of it, we'll call that probably like the Odatria and the and probably the depressor in that sense. There's something about kind of little cryptic lizards or cryptic monitors and things that I don't know. I just find it interesting. I love coming in here and just being able to sit back in my chair and actually just watch what's happening. And I think the arid species thing just really resonates with me just because I love the country. So being able to go out to the country and actually seeing what it's like out there, I just love that sort of landscape. So to be able to kind of bring it home and have a little piece of that at home and the species from out that way, that's another part of it. So I can kind of almost feel like I'm on holidays. I don't know, like seeing these sorts of places in the wild almost brings me a certain peace. So to be able to kind of have that at home, when I'm super stressed or feeling like crap, I love coming back to it, like it's just something about it. But the cryptic species in particular, like I did a bit of a write-up on Instagram on Tristis the other day about how a lot of people kind of put them off as like a crap captive, they're no good, you may as well keep an empty tank and all this sort of stuff. To me, I haven't had that experience. I've always loved the Tristis. I always find them pretty interactive. Yes, they can be, a bit secluded. They might feel like they're hiding a fair bit or whatever. But I feel like if you treat them or you respect them for what they are and how they act, to me, that's an impressive lizard nonetheless. So like I freaked out the other day because I put a new branch in the Tristis tank. It's just a tall gum branch, goes top to bottom. I was like, one day soon I'm going to see a lizard on that, just investigating it or whatever. And I managed to catch him doing it. I was like, yes, you know, like just putting that little thing in his environment and seeing him use it. It's like took him a week, but
Yeah.
or you know, maybe it didn't take him a week. Maybe I just wasn't
You
here.
just didn't see it. Yeah.
But you know, being able to see it, I was like, that's sick. You know, like it's just I got a kick out of that. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's just the small little cryptic things and cryptic quirks. Like I love just seeing the depressors just like poking their head out of the log or whatever it is. And yeah, I think it all goes back to country. Like just being able to go to it and see it and bring it home. It's good fun. Yeah.
That is a good transition into from bush to box, but I've got a couple of questions before we do.
Yeah.
I just want to say one little caveat, which I found quite funny. But no one else probably will. But I watched your video recently with the cricket feeding, and you were saying about the depressor. And I'll be honest, I don't know too much about Algonia. And I was like, if there's a lizard for me, the one with the Latin name of like depressor, I was like, that is my lizard. I need. And then they, like you say, they came out and they were like quirky little, like in my head it was like a Pokemon. It was just like jumping around. I was like, this is cool. I don't.
They're basically like a skink Gilleni, so I think that's why I'm so attracted to them. Because they live in like very similar sorts of environments, pretty similar diet. You know, like but I tell you what, they're savage. They're like a different kettle of fish altogether to Gilleni. Like they might have similar sorts of traits, but skinks are nasty. Like they can be real jerks.
The breeding of blue tongues I've seen, they look like savages, like how they bite and stuff.
Everyone thinks goannas are nuts. Goannas have like generally the best courtship. They're so soft and gentle with each other. Bearded dragons and blue tongues, complete opposite. You know, but generally they make better pets. You know, but their breeding behaviors are completely different.
Yeah,
sorry,
the monitors.
Off track again, but yeah.
No, that's fine. That's what we're here for. The monitors would like they cuddle, you know, like the Gilleni, they'd just be out. Like the female had her arm over the top of the male, and the male had his back leg over the top of her the other day. And I was just like, yeah, you know, and he was like, she's fine. She's like, he's fine. And well, the other two females were like, right, let's just wait our turn. And my male Aki, he, again, I'm anthropomorphizing, but if I take my male out whilst my female's laying or whatever, my male Aki does fuck all. He just sits in one corner and sulks. Second I put him back in there, he's over there licking her neck, like rubbing his head on her head. And it's like, there's something there. That's not just me going, oh, they're in love. There's something. He knows that animal. He's been with her since I've pretty much had them. And he very much is affectionate towards her. She couldn't give a shit about him, but he very much cares for her, which I find interesting, because a lot of times a lot of people will be like, oh, reptiles are very primitive, uncognitive creatures. And then, like you say, when you sit back and you watch the subtleties, and like, I prefer Tristus to Kimberly's, as a captive. I really, really enjoyed Tristus, and they were a very shy species, and normally I'm not really attracted to shy species. He says keeping enclosures of dirt, but I think a lot of times people will get an animal without realizing what that animal is, and like you say, enjoying. You set yourself up for failure because you go into a species before realizing what the species is and what the species does, which is why the wild and the natural ecology is so important. Because if you in your head are expecting, for example, a Tristus to act like an Aki, you're going to be let down. Whereas if I really enjoy, like you say, you put one branch in, and I did it with Mango's enclosure. I put one big sweeping branch. I was like, she's going to climb vertical up that. And the first time she did it, it was like the most exciting thing in the world. I was like, I knew she would use it exactly how I planned, because you figure out your species and you know exactly what they're going to do, and you can set the enclosure up accordingly. And I think a lot of times people miss out on that sort of stuff by putting one hide at the cool side, one hide at the hot side, and a branch between, and you don't really get the enjoyment of what it is to keep an animal, you know?
I can appreciate everyone in the comments absolutely ripping Tristus a new one. But, you know, as I said, that ain't my experience. Like the pair that I got now, their parents were my original pair, and I actually sold them to a friend. And one day he turned around and he's like, man, these things are awesome. He bred some and he just gave me some back. He's like, just have them. I was like, oh, you're a legend. Anyway, I raised them up. And that original pair, the male used to nest guard like crazy. So the female would burrow down, lay her eggs. She would go up and bask or whatever. He'd sit there. And just be like on it, like. So sometimes it used to be a pain to actually get around, and I'd have to get him out of the tank so he didn't try to bite me and stuff like that, because he knew that his future progeny were down there. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
But whereas I've had a male Tristis orientalis just like scoff down the female's eggs like it's no tomorrow. So I've had both sides of it, but I don't know. I just find that whole group very interesting. And that's just me. And like Frozzy said earlier, everyone's got opinions. So each to their own, different strokes for different folks.
I'm on this one with you, though. Tristis, for me, are a much better captive than Kim's. It's the unpopular opinion, but I'll join your side for that one, because I've had Kim's.
I'm not saying they're better than Kim's.
Okay.
I'm not saying Kim's are better than Tristis either. I'm saying they're on par, but for their own traits.
Okay, and you have. To be fair, you have both.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So what makes an animal good? It's what the keeper wants out of that animal. But if you haven't, if you didn't know what you're signing up for, and you got Tristis, and you knew that you're going to go sometimes a week without seeing them or something like that, then you're going to be disappointed. But if you can appreciate the quirks of them, you're going to love them just as much as a Kimbo or a Gillen's or whatever it might be. It's all relative.
You're not wrong. And again, I think people do forget that, where, like you say, you're expecting one thing from one species, and it's impossible for me to tell somebody what the best pet lizard is for them. And the answer is just the one that you want. And how do you know which one the one is? Well, the one that you see and it just sets your heart on fire. The one that you see and you're like, yeah, this is exciting, and you do have to keep several species sometimes to figure that out, to figure out what your quirks are. And it sort of, again, wraps this whole thing back round. And some people are really lucky and it falls in their lap and they find their species from day one. And I've said it before on here that for me to then go out and get a species now that is naturally quite shy, because for the most part, I like to be able to watch and observe my animals, and I have limited windows to do that, is just in a way sometimes stupid, because I'm almost setting myself up for failure. But then there are a couple of species in that category. For example, Tristis, they were quite a shy captive. My female was very shy. But when I saw her, the enjoyment of seeing her come out, bask, climb back down, have a little run around was so much more than the 10 times I'd interacted with my Ackies or whatever, because I'm enjoying her for her rather than enjoying Tristis because it's a Tristis. But you don't get that until you start to make a bit more elaborate enclosures and allow the animals to do what they're doing. And then again, that sort of brings us from bush to box. What sort of gave you that idea of, for people that don't know what it is, if you'd like to explain what it is, and then how you sort of came up with the idea of doing it?
So basically, from bush to box is a little company or a little side business that I started where I take images of the wild habitats here in Australia, and I get them printed on some pretty dang durable vinyl, and you can essentially use these as like a giant sticker and put them inside your enclosure as like a background, or work it into a rock background of sorts. And it's just a way to kind of brighten it up and kind of have like a little piece of nature in your house, kind of make it a bit more like a zoo exhibit, if you want to call it that. I got very bored of looking at a plain black tank or a glass tank or a white tank or something like that, and the whole cork bark thing or the whole rock wall thing, it's not for everybody. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I still do it in some tanks and all the rest, but it's just a way to kind of just change it up. And it's basically a thought where you can kind of take this gigantic sticker, stick it into a tank, and it's almost like an instant result, whereas like some people, they might like to keep animals a little bit more sterile. So, not necessarily goannas, but let's just say, for example, some python keepers, or some people might keep venomous snakes or something like that. It's a way that they can kind of keep an enclosure a little bit more simple, still be functional and cleanable. So it's just kind of like a bit of a way to, I don't know, just branch out and give people options, but still kind of make it look like a little slice of nature.
Yeah, I was going to say your frilly enclosure. I think the video was a while ago, but I remember watching it. The sticks that you made, because it was like a burnt background, and the sticks that you made. And I was saying to Fee literally like 2 days ago when we were watching your video, I was like, oh, you see those sticks? Like he made those. They're not like burnt sticks. He actually like pieced them together and painted them and did this stuff like that.
Yeah.
What I know the answers to this question, at least I think I do, but what is the inspiration for sort of doing that? Where does your brain go once you've stuck your real, I'll see if I can bring it up on Instagram in a second, but you've stuck your real real photographs of these outback scenes, and then where does your brain go from then as you start to come in from building the enclosure?
Are you talking about like the origin story about how I came up with the idea, or
just how you design your enclosures? So obviously you've stuck the background on.
Yeah.
All of your enclosures have, Luke, this is the first reptile video I remember you showing me in our relationship. Oh, there you go. We've been together for like, I'm going to get this fucking wrong. We've been together for 5 years this year, and you're the first person that she remembers me showing you.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I told you I've been watching you a while. No cap. So my question is, I worded it terribly, so let's start again. You've stuck your stickers on, your push to box vinyls, and so you now have the blueprint, if you like.
Yeah.
How do you then decide what goes in the meat and bones of the enclosure? For example, the frilly, you obviously have the burnt sticks coming up.
Yeah.
And then your Kimberly, you have the fake rock, which I believe is also a nest box on the right. How does your brain sort of get you into that place where you're like, right, I have my skeleton. How do I meet it out?
So I do two things. I look at the image and look at what species that's going to suit. So, for example, like the Kimberly, we'll just take, for example, to start. Obviously, the species, it's a rock monitor. It's going to need rocks. It's going to need all that climbing space and the crevices and all the rest of it. I did happen to take an image from essentially where their eastern population is over in the NT, where there's kind of like a little separate population of them. Wish I found them there. That would have been nice. But, being able to blend rock work and usable space into a setting where you still kind of got like parts of image around it. I don't know. It's got to be functional, but also practical, there he is on his log.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a way to try to blend it. So for example, like if you take the frillneck tank, for example, it's, what does frillneck do? He goes up high in the trees all day, every day, comes down when he wants bugs. That's about all he really does, apart from, hiding up in the trees. So by taking that particular image where there was perfect upright trees and then, finding suitable branches to then kind of convert into usable space for him inside of the enclosure, it's like a marriage. You just got to try to marry the two up basically and work from there. It's, like you wouldn't take the frillneck's enclosure background behind me and use it for like a shingleback skink. Like, it's just not practical. Yeah, it's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to like replicate these wild environments as close as possible into how they looked out in nature, and then bringing that home for that particular species. So for me personally, I'm taking certain images with an animal in mind about what species might be there. So yeah, Tristus was a perfect example.
I was trying to find one of the frilly, but I couldn't see them. But yeah, I remember watching that enclosure and that video, of the frilly enclosure. And like we were saying earlier about you saying people message you going, fuck me, what's the word? The inspiration behind an enclosure. Like I saw that and I was like, if I could ever be good enough one day to like make this wood match the background. Quickly, I think this is to you. Do you ship to UK/US?
Yeah, I can ship anywhere. Just shipping costs can be a bit expensive, so we just have to work it out during a private chat.
Okay, cool. If anyone's interested,
Yeah.
his links are in the description. Send Luke a message. But yeah, and even like the idea, like I'm a tradesperson, I can use tools and shit, but it's the idea of cutting a piece of ply and then screwing wood to it to then make it almost removable, standing up, universal in an enclosure. I was like, that's a fucking genius idea. Like, that's a genius idea. So I was like, yeah, as soon as I did the Gilleni enclosure, even though I watched that video however many years ago, I mean, it might not have been years ago, but in my head it feels I watched it a while ago. But anyway, I was like, I know exactly how I'm going to do this. I know exactly how I'm going to set this scene and what I need to sort of do it. And it's those sort of ideas and like things that you figured out. And what do you think has been the biggest driving force for yourself to continue to strive to make these? Because I see your fake mock rock, fake rock, whatever it's called. And me and Fee are gonna, because Fee's really like artistic. She's really good at crafts, and I've said to her, like, we've got some baby Gilleni coming. We'll get some foam and we can play around with some backgrounds, and it can just be a fun little couple activity. And I know I'm going to be terrible, but you don't get better. I'm pretty sure it was Tyson I was speaking to. You don't get better until you keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was like, one, what's your biggest tip to someone like myself who's just going to start on this sort of journey? And two, what continues to make you continue to get better? I know we've sort of touched on it, but in the sense of constantly changing and evolving stuff.
As far as tips go, take your time. Be prepared to spend a lot of time doing it. So, you know, for example, I'm doing a background on my rough scale tank at the moment, like a full mock rock wall. And it's time consuming, like sitting down and carving foam and using certain products on foam, whether you go grout or other products. Like it's, you know, it is time consuming. So that was one thing that kind of led me to the background images for a lot of species. Is it's an instant result, essentially. It doesn't take much to screw some upright logs together or whatever it might be. But, you know, I'd say definitely give it a crack. It's good fun, especially when you get some, you know, outcomes that you really enjoy. You know, like these termite mounds that are in these tanks now, like they double as nest boxes, right? And these are the third set of termite mounds that I've made for lizard tanks now. The first ones weren't too bad. The second ones actually looked like penises, so they weren't that crush up. So I kind of scrapped those and wasted all my money on those. And then, you know, these ones I'm pretty happy with. I still want to do better, but I think that's just us as our personalities. We're always going to want to do better. Yeah. So, you know, for me now, like, whilst my tanks are pretty much set up the way that I'd like them, I'm starting to toy around with new ideas. You know, just simple thing like putting that log in that tristis tank. I put it in a fashion where it's going to be movable, you know, so I can move it around into different positions. Because a lot of my tanks are the same height, I can cycle that through different tanks. So now those animals are getting different smells, different textures, all that sort of stuff. So trying to do things like that to kind of push things a little bit further, to kind of make things a little bit interchangeable. I don't know. It's about seeing how the animals react. You know, to me, I like seeing those new behaviors, like the tristis hanging off the log with his head sticking out. Like, fuck, I thought that was baller. You know,
I know exactly.
That's how you'd see it in nature. You know, but I've never seen it here before. So seeing that was just awesome. Something I really want to play around with, and I kind of need to find the right pieces of wood, is like vertical nest boxes for Gilleni in tree hollows. Like, one of my mates, he's sent me a video not long before we found some Gilleni, or a Gilleni, and he caught a female nesting in a termite mound that was inside of a tree hollow. So, you know, that's something I want to toy around with, is try to get some good hollow branches and maybe use some plastic pipes with red sand in it or something like that, or red sand and Koya mix or something like that, and see if they want to nest up high. I know in your experience, I think you've got a up high nest box as well where you've had some success.
Yeah, so 4 of the 5 clutches have been laid arboreally, and the clutch that wasn't laid arboreally, she dug around in the arboreal nest box. Obviously, couldn't find a place to be happy, and then laid literally an inch under the ground in the floor.
Oh wow!
And the female that's currently digging around to lay in the next 4 or 5 days, she's digging around in the arboreal nest box as we speak. It's hideous. It's a white bucket that I fixed up with some screws, and it kind of ruins the whole aesthetic of the enclosure. So it's going to be one of the first things that I am going to do myself, is actually try and do some arboreal nest boxing. I'm not sure exactly how I want to do it yet. I don't know whether I want to do it in the similar stuff to the background, or if I want to almost make it look like an arboreal termite mound and have like a small bucket on the inside that I can just almost like sort of like Mike's monitors did with the undoable lid, but have it upside down. Obviously the bucket right way up, and then the bucket comes out. So I can point the top or just shape the lid. I'm not sure. But either way, I have these ideas, but I've never put it into practice. So like you say, it's probably going to end up looking like some sort of phallus. And then I'm going to go, I think I prefer the white bucket. But it's just a case of trial and error. And I think there is something to Gilleni laying arboreally. Scandinavian guanas, here he is. He's the one who put me onto it, and he has a great... I'm not sure exactly how big your enclosure is, so if you can let me know, Mr. Scandinavian guanas, but he has a fuck-off enclosure. It's like 5-6 foot tall, 4 or 5 foot wide for a trio of Gilleni. It's fucking massive.
That's awesome.
And they always nest arboreally. Always nest arboreally. He's got a ground level nest box, but they always nest arboreally. And he said to me about it, and I went, well, I've got a gravid female. What does it hurt? And I had a low level nest box in there. So I put a high level one. And as soon as I put the high level one, instantly all 4 of them were like, well, what the fuck is this? They were in and out of it, digging around. And I literally had a clutch of eggs in there. Next day, took the eggs out. Next day, put it in there. And the other female, like I say, they were 3 days apart, went straight in there the next day and laid again. And I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, they clearly love it. And then the third female, she took longer to lay than the other 2. She was obviously unhappy with it because she dug it round, tore it round. She threw loads of dirt out of it. And then she went into the ground level nest box. And I started digging like that, and I scraped back 2 fingers, and there were the eggs. So if I went rough, in my head, I was expecting them to be. So they were all nested. They weren't scattered. They were nested.
Yeah.
But they were nested like literally an inch below the sand. But then the second time round, she laid in the arboreal nest box, no issues. Gilleni cage is 90 centimeters wide, 180 centimeters high, and 125 centimeters deep. So yeah, 3 foot wide, 6 foot tall, and 4 and a bit foot deep for 3 Gilleni. Awesome. It's fucking amazing. Please, everyone, send likes also if you can. And hello, Canada Varanids. Thank you for tuning in. Even though we're going to probably start wrapping up at some point because we're closing into the 3 hour mark. And I think it's getting late where you are. I'm not sure. Is it 10 o'clock for you now?
Yeah, 20 past.
Yeah, so we can start.
It's okay. My voice is only going to last so long.
That's fine. Normally, people's laptops or iPads crash, but it'll be your voice before. Like, people are like, oh, is there a connection issue? And you're just like... But yeah, so let me just refer back to my roadmap. So that's pretty much all that. So like I say, I'm in no rush to leave it. Someone did ask me to ask you about the Australian hobby. So basically, Europe, America, you can keep whatever the fuck you want whenever you want. We touched a little bit on the licensing at the start. Australia and I believe New Zealand, for the most part, you can only keep natives. What's your opinion on the Australian hobby and species diversity?
I honestly think we don't have it that bad here. Like, I know there's always like that grass is greener on the other side type mentality, but considering we're only allowed to keep natives, we are a country with like hundreds of natives, so we do have a pretty good access to a lot of cool animals. Would I love to keep some tortoises in my backyard? Hell yeah. Like, I reckon that'd be mad. I love tortoises. I love going up to the reptile park up the road and seeing the big tortoises and stuff there. But, as far as a private keeper, I think we've got it pretty good. The one thing that I do wish about the Australian hobby is maybe we had a bit more of a uniform license amongst states. and maybe a few more species being freed up. So, just for example, I can't keep Prasnus in New South Wales, but you can in Queensland. There's certain things like that if it'd be good if it was uniform, but all in all, I don't think it's that bad. Like, we've got seriously that many animals in captivity here, that many cool species. I'm not complaining.
I've obviously I'm not going to tell you the motherland, Tyson. I don't know, but I've been made aware that apparently New Zealand, there's a certain amount of species that are native. There's a couple of that aren't, that you can keep. There are no snakes at all, and for the most part, the New Zealand hobby, from what I've been told, there doesn't seem to be a monetary value on animals. A lot of people just chop and trade, and if you want this, you trade it with someone else rather than sell and buy. There's the kind of consensus I get. But again, I don't know. But yeah, on that as well, just because I've sort of thought about it. What is your opinion on... I don't know how to word this question. Let's just say the worth of animals, because obviously we as keepers... we sort of depict what an animal's worth, and that changes across countries.
Yeah.
What is your sort of opinion on animal pricing and that sort of breeding? Not necessarily like you and I do, because we breed and sell babies, so we are in the conversation, but like being a breeder and having to buy to sell animals and that kind of side of the hobby. What's your opinion on that?
Well, like, it's always a fluctuating market, right? Like, everything goes in ebbs and flows. Like, take for example, knobtail geckos here. When I first started kind of really getting into breeding, I bred a shit ton of them, and they went down to like a $50 lizard.
Yeah.
And now these days they're back up around that kind of like $150, $200 mark, depending on where you are. It's just like swings of popularity, I think, more than anything, and supply and demand. Like, it's always just going to be what depicts the market. But do I think it's a bad thing? Not necessarily. I think as long as you as a seller are selling something that you're happy with for the price that you believe the animal's worth, and somebody else is happy to pay that price because they're getting a lizard from you that they trust or whatever, then I don't see an issue with it.
It's a hard one, because in the UK at the moment, because obviously I know you may or may not be able to relate because obviously you're Australia, but we left the European Union because Britain is a racist nation, and we wanted to make Britain great again and make it 100% British blood and oust all the foreigners, and everyone rallied behind the Prime Minister and that sort of mindset. And then we left the European Union, and they basically went, yeah, we can't get rid of the foreigners. All the people were like, we want to revote. But anyway, I'm not here to do politics. Long story short, we're no longer part of the trade of European Union. So basically, monitor lizards they have to have some form of CITES importation. I've never really looked into CITES. I don't know how it works, but long story short, we need to apply for import and export to get any monitors that aren't already here on the UK, which has made the market kind of go crazy. For example, the tree monitor stuff, you could just get it from Europe, and you could get wild caught into some places in Europe, and then once it's in Europe, it just gets to the UK. It's fine. So now all we can get is captive bred, and which is great. That side of it is amazing, and we can only get UK captive bred without paying an arm and a leg to get it here. But then that almost monopolizes it. So the tree monitor breeders, the price went up because the demand went up and the supply was lower. It's simple business. Now the demand is lower, the supply is higher, thus the price has to start coming down. And some people seem to want to hold on to the value. For example, Gilleni, before I got them, were a nicely priced lizard. They were probably around the £450, £500 mark. Now you're probably looking around 250, 300. Yeah. So they're pretty much half the price of what they were. I couldn't give a shit because I think they're incredible. Yeah. But then I think that just leads into why people shouldn't come into it for money, because you'll always lose. And then eventually in 2 or 3 years' time, they'll come back up because no one wants to breed them or whatever. I just find it. I find it a strange concept. Just again, this is 100% me thing and my brain thing. But like, we produce these animals, and then I go, right, yep, you're £300, and that to me just is weird. Nothing wrong with it, and again, if it didn't happen, I wouldn't own any animals. So again, I'm not bashing it at all. It's just in my head. It's a weird concept of we create life, deem a value to it, and then just ship it on its merry way. I just don't know how. I think that again goes to the it will never be enough enclosure to the wild. I don't think I struggle with that aspect of the hobby personally.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. I think it's just one of those things that, you know, how do you get away from that? The way that I can see that you can get away from that, and whether you call it actually getting away from it or not, is if you want another species from another person. For example, you look at trading lizards. So it's not necessarily a money value. Maybe it's just a one this for a one that or something like that. You know, that at least there's no value on it. It's more just like you're having fun with the animals you're producing. You know?
No, I agree. I love the idea of trading. I've been trying to sort out a few trades for Strophoros for my Gilleni, and if we're arguing money, the Gilleni is worth more than Strophoros in the current market. But I'm like, yeah, we'll do 1 for 1. Doesn't, you know, just trade. Because for me, it's I want Strophoros. It's money. It's cost me no money. My Gilleni are a byproduct of me enjoying my Gilleni. So that for me is exciting. But I know, again, it's not everyone, but some people go, well, my Gilleni are worth 300 and my Strophoros are worth 150. So I want 2 Strophoros, and it just gets complicated with some people. They want everything for nothing, and it just gets messy. But I've hopefully secured a couple of trades, and like I say, I've managed to locate a female Cinctus. And again, it's that whole thing of why can't I just have the male Cinctus and enjoy him? That's another thing in my head. Why did I have to buy a female? You know?
I think being able to do that shows a lot of restraint. You know, like, I'm happy with my frilly like that. I'm happy with my beardy like that. My shinglebacks like that. I got a blotched blue tongue like that. I got a Cunningham skink like that. She-oak skink. You know, I've got a few things kicking around, but couldn't care less to breed them. You just enjoy the animal for what they are, you know. But then again, you know, understand that, you know, certain species you're interested in that biology of them, so you want to do it. So, you know.
Yeah, it's a hard one because the more I get into it, the more I'm like, I just want some pets that I enjoy, you know. I have a pair of Prasinus. My female's way too young to be bred yet. She'll probably be looking to be breeding if I wanted to at the end of next year. And I've dreamed of owning Prasinus since I was 7, so 22 years now. So the idea of producing them, and admittedly, I'd be able to find homes for them, so that doesn't come into the equation. But the idea of producing them, like, okay, I've seen this animal for its full whole life cycle, and that excites me. You know, I've gone from this kid that never thought he'd get them to now producing them, and that really excites me, and that is why I'm doing it. And I think the whole time I look at it like that, rather than these lizards are worth a couple of quid, then I think it's healthy. For me personally, as soon as I start looking at them as dollar signs, and again, I have no issue with people that breed animals for money at all, and I'd be lying if I said I'm not happy with how much money I've got in my incubator. Hopefully, I'm not going to shy away from it because I know I can upgrade some animals now, and I can get some other things that I may or may not have had chance to. Night all, thanks, Mr. Friday. I appreciate you stopping in, mate. But yeah, I think for me personally, as soon as I start getting caught up in money, I think for me, I start to get a bit bogged down. And again, it's everyone's different, and this is just me personally. And I don't know how we as individual keepers get to a place of just finding 100% pure tranquility and happiness. But I don't know, again, if it's just me and my brain, you know?
I think that's us and our brains. more than anything. But I understand what you mean. At the end of the day, if Gil and I are worth $20 here, I'm still going to have them. I really don't care. I'm in it for the animal. But like you say, I'm not going to lie to say that they helped me out monetarily a lot this year. They helped my wife stay off work for a little bit longer with my young fella being brought up. So, you know, I thank them so much for it, and the people who pay for them so much for it. But again, it's not necessarily the be all and end all. If they drop down to $20, they're still going to be here because I love the lizard. So, but yeah, you're right. 100% tranquility with it all. It's hard to find that equilibrium.
I'm going to ask you the question that I asked Chris Applin, and you've already touched on it, but I'm just going to ask you it. And you've already said about it with your snakes. But basically, I asked Chris, seeing the animals in the wild, how does it reflect your keeping? And obviously, we have touched on this throughout the podcast. Do you think a day will come where you just go, do you know what? I'm not keeping anymore? Or do you think you're too ingrained in enjoying captivity?
I'm enjoying it now, but I don't see that as impossible. I've got a few friends that, you know, have been long-time keepers and have gone out and experienced a lot of wild animals and gone, I can't do this at home anymore because it's not right. Not necessarily it's not right, but I can't do them justice to how I want to do them justice. You know, so like I remember being on, you know, that herp trip with Tyson and Luke and Ricky. And I was like, man, I'd love to do glebo palmer. You know, we don't have them in captivity here, or, you know, there's a few people that do have them, but it's very hush, not supposed to happen. But like, they're a species that really interests me. Whether that's just because they're so not here, that it's like an allure, but like they're just like little rock parentes. It's like a really cool lizard.
Yeah, I love them.
But yeah, like after talking to Ricky and Luke while we were out, and they're going, you know, we've seen X amount of these things. There is no captive environment that's big enough for what these animals use and need. It almost just seems like it's, you know, an evolution of you as a keeper or a past keeper, that you kind of hit a point where you go, you know, this is it. I know that, you know, Tyson touched on this with Luke in particular in his podcast with you about how he was really interested in these little brown Kalia skinks. You know, he's turned around to me so many times and gone, I'd love like an 8-foot fish tank with like 3 of these skinks in it, and these skinks are like this big. But like to him, that's fair because he sees what they use in the wild and he's trying to equate that to size. But then we're keeping bigger lizards, and let's just take those glebos for example. Talking like what, 3 to 4 foot lizard or a mangrove, you know, swimming in the ocean in Ricky's Insta stories and stuff like that. Like, when you're seeing stuff like that, like you had that epiphany to kind of go, how the hell do I do that? Do I see myself getting to that point? Not potentially, but I really do enjoy the keeping because I can sit down here and enjoy it. I know I've often talked about getting rid of it all and just doing a walking Gilleni room. Things are ticking there, you know. But you know, it might be half a dozen Gilleni in a room this size. I'll just do my prints on the wall and have like 12 upright branches and a chair in the middle and all these overhead heaters just cooking the thing. But maybe one day I get to that point where I go, that's where I want to be. You know, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what the future holds. Yeah, exactly.
I say to people how I like to do. Apparently, it's an ADHD thing. So I don't know if anyone ADHD wise that do or don't know that they have it, but like likening analogies to stuff. So, for example, I could just simply say we're all on a reptile keeping journey, but I like to paint a scene and a picture for it. So, like, I like to say that we're all in the exact same car, on the exact same road. Sorry, all in different cars, and we're all driving down the same road, and we don't know where the road's going, but it's just reptile keeping. And I might look out the window and see a mangrove swimming in the ocean and go, fuck, I can't do mangroves justice. I can't do mangroves justice. Whereas someone sees the exact same thing and they go, yeah, my mangrove enclosure is good enough. And both are okay because eventually we'll all end up at the end, and the end is going to be different for all of us, you know, and we're all seeing different things. And I like to try and share what I've seen, and you'll share what you've seen. And sometimes we've both seen the same thing, just on a different part of the journey. And sometimes we'll see completely different things. And that to me is why it's exciting. The idea, like I say, of getting a tiny little Strophosaurus and putting it in a 36 by 18 by 36 Exoterra, and just having sticks, custom background, or one of your backgrounds, for example. And I'm just like, because wow, that's incredible. Or walking in and just, like I say, seeing stuff done okayly, it starts to dishearten me. But if you spoke to me 6 months ago, I wouldn't have had that opinion. And again, it's all part of riding that car journey. And I haven't even seen them in the wild. God help me when I do. Because we're selling everything. Because I generally am. I see videos and I'm like, oh God, let alone actually seeing them. And I'm hoping to get out to Australia in 25, all being well. And do a bit of herping in Australia. And then I'm hoping to get out to Indonesia as well and do a bit of herping in Indonesia. And I worry that will be the nail in my coffin, but I don't know if that's a bad thing.
I remember when, the penny dropped for me when I saw the Gilleni. I remember turning around to Tyson and Luke just going, we're just doing it wrong, you know? And that was coming from a place that I love the lizard, but I was like, I need to put that challenge to myself to try to do better. You know, it might not be right now, but in your journey on that road, I'll get there. And, you know, that could be you with your Strophosaurus. I can't tell, like, I've never seen a Stroph in a 90 by 90 centimeter tank. You know, I think that's great. That's your goal. But when you see one in the wild, like, you know, 6 meters up in a pine tree, well, there goes that. But you got to keep it relative and realistic. You know, is that animal going to live a happy life in a 90 by 90 centimeter tank? Hell yeah. It was going to be better than the 60 by 45 I had mine in. You know, especially when you got it all pushed out and it's got a billion places to hide and you spend half an hour looking for the thing, you know. But that's half the fun. You know, it's like herping in your own room too.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put that. Yeah. That is a good way to put that. We all love doing it. Go to a zoo. What's the first thing you do? Try and spot the reptile. Where are the reptiles?
Yeah.
Like, because you have these big natural enclosures, you know, and me and Fee do it all the time. We go to zoo and we have the little competitions it helps that I know what I'm looking for because she's not a reptile person, and then it pisses me off when she sees it first. But that's the part of the fun, you know, and doing it, that's a very good way of putting it is like herping in your room. That is, you know, sometimes you just hear like little sayings and they really sit with you. That for me is just like really opened my eyes to something that I was already aware of, but like the way that you've worded that is like resonated a lot with me actually.
It's funny because like quite often I'd actually come into this room or when I was in the garage or whatever, and I'd have my headlamp on like I was herping, you know, and I'd be like, where's those geckos? You know, like I'd be looking for them or whatever. They've got to be out tonight. They've got to be doing this. You know, like even in that little tank that's now got Tristus in it, but I had a trio of Strophs in there, the Williams Eye. I used to take ages for me to find 3 Strophs in that. So imagine how your tank's going to be when it's, you know, 3 times the size. It's going to be better for the animals anyway because they're going to get better thermoregulation of the size of the enclosure and all the rest of it. But yeah, deck it out so much that you're planning not to be able to see them easily. But as long as they can functionally get the food they need, and live their lives, that's where you got to find the balance.
Yeah,
and have fun herping.
It's a dance. It's both parties have to benefit, and a lot of times people say to me, like, again, bringing it back to mangroves, but it's my whole personality nowadays. People are like, why don't you just get them out? Why don't you do this? Like, why do you just have these empty enclosures? Why do you just do this? Why don't you have empty enclosures? And I'm like, I try my best not to be a selfish keeper. Like me emptying my mangroves enclosure And so I have a small pair, the youngsters. They're in an 8 foot long, 3 foot deep, 3 foot tall, and they're only like 18 inches long. And they're in this big enclosure with big branches, lots of deep soil and stuff. And people are like, well, just empty it, cut it out, reduce the branches. And I'm like, but what? Who is benefiting? Me massively. But what am I taking away from these animals just so I can benefit and see them? You know, when in 3 years' time they'll be adults and I won't want to see them because they'll be trying to kill me. So it's a lot of times people become selfish to their own. That people become their own worst enemies through selfish demises, and I don't think people do it to go, "Oh, fuck the animals." I think people do it because, like you say, they haven't had that idea of herping in their room, and they're like, "Yeah, okay, a small enclosure, a bit more empty. I can see my animal," but your animal's not exhibiting that what it's supposed to do, and then I think you end up where I am now, and you go, "Fuck, it's all fucking wrong." We got to get, and then you start to change and transition and grow and mold, and you go, "Okay, this is okay. This is a place where I can be okay," and then you just work off that.
Yeah. It's always a starting point, but you know, as we've said so many times over this, as long as we're evolving, as long as we're thinking, you know, we can always be changing. We're always going to be changing. I don't think this hobby's ever going to just stop and go, all right, that's it.
That's is standard. Yeah.
This is your glass ceiling. You're not breaking through it. Things are always going to chop and change, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we could go on forever and a day, mate, but I'm going to start wrapping it up because your voice is going to give out and I'll get you to bed. But if you're down, I'd love to have you back on at some point just to shoot the shit again.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I have 2 wrap-up questions at the end of every podcast. If anyone has any final questions, as an Australian, what's your opinion on... I mean, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that.
Couldn't even tell you who it is.
What's your opinion on Angie Postecoglou? Anyway, moving swiftly on. If you can elaborate, Michael, let me know, but I don't know. Yeah, any final questions, drop them in now because we're going to start wrapping up. But I've got the 2 final wrap-up questions. So, what's your one piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting the reptile hobby?
Suck up as much information as you can and form your own conclusions on what you want to do. And if it doesn't work, don't be disheartened. You can always come around and better it again.
Deep. Did you think about that or did it just come to you?
No, that just came to me.
Introspection. Love it. What's your opinion on Dickens cider? That's an inside joke.
I couldn't even tell you what Dickens cider is.
Neither could I. Football coach, was the manager of Australian national team in 2014 World Cup, 2015 Asian Games.
I don't follow footy.
No, he's the Tottenham manager. Yeah, football is the most pointless sport in the world. More people are going to hate me even more now. So the next question. I always word this completely differently. And a lot of people say it's like morbid. But what's the one piece of advice that... Did you not hear it? Oh, fucking hell. What did I do wrong? Oh, dick inside her. Not anytime soon, Tyson, because I've just recently had an operation. Anyway, fuck. What's the one piece of advice that you would like to instill into your child / potentially children?
I don't know. For me, I just want to teach, my son, potential future offspring, just a respect for the natural world. So I don't care if he doesn't grow up and want to do what I'm doing. I'm going to love him for whatever he chooses. But as long as he can somehow connect back to nature in some form, whether that be captive or just appreciating the world without the skyscrapers and the rat race and all that sort of stuff, if I can give him that, that's all I want. Because I hate getting caught up in it, and I know I do. And I think that's why I kind of have my little sanctuary. What I try to make my sanctuary here That's why I try to go out to the field where I can. Yeah, that's what I want for him. I want him to just appreciate it. And funnily, he knows no different at the moment. So he's trying to grab whatever he can and touch whatever he can. And, you know, he stands up inside the Boyd's Forest Dragon tank and looks at him while he's holding onto a branch too. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. Just that love of nature that I had from a young age.
It's so important. My son, my one and only son, he is soon to be 6. And as of recently, no influence of me, actually generally no influence of me. He's become obsessed with bugs. So every time he comes to my house, he's like, Daddy, we need to go on a bug hunt. Let's go on a bug hunt. And I have a bunch of isopods here and different critters. And he's like, oh, Daddy, let me see the bugs. And obviously I've always said to him, like, when he was younger, he would, like, when he was younger, he's still young, he'd be scared of spiders and stuff, which is going to be a taught behavior from, I can't really word it, but basically someone in his life is teaching him that spiders are scary, whereas it's my job to now undo that. And he now goes, he goes, no, they're not scary. You just have to understand that they're scared of you and stuff. And he words it in his own little ways. And the problem is we have nothing super dangerous over here, but the problem is still at 6. He's like, right, yeah, look, Daddy caught a spider. So you have to
the boundaries.
Yeah, leave the spider alone. But yeah, like when we go and flip some tin, him and my nephew are always like, oh, Uncle Paul, yeah, he's the weird one that likes reptiles. Let's go with Uncle Paul and fight the snakes. So I think that, because before you know it, you're caught up in school and you care about girls or boys, and all of a sudden it's the end of the world if someone doesn't ask you to go to a dance. And the next thing you know, you need to get into college or uni, and then you're working and you forget that there's this whole wide world just outside of this little screen that you've been blessed to listen to us for 3 hours and 16 minutes and 16 seconds. So
it's important to nurture it.
Oh, 100%. It's where it's all where we sort of all originated from, and going back to nature sometimes is the only way to shut your brain up, you know, whether it's a slice of nature you build yourself or just going for a walk in the woods. You know, there's a lot of people, I don't know if you saw, a lot of people have commented how tranquil it's been quite nice listening to the crickets, making it a much more naturalistic conversation. But yeah, unless there's any questions you have for me, mate, we'll get this a little bit, and any final questions, we'll get this wrapped up.
No, I'm happy, man. This has been an awesome chat. Thanks for having me on.
No. Like I said to you, I said it to you off air. I'll say it to you again on air. I was nervous was the wrong word, because I wasn't nervous, but I almost didn't feel ready to like speak to you, because like I say, I as Fee like threw me under the bus. Been watching you for years, and I've always found you as such an inspiration. And every single person that I've spoken to about you, in the sense of, like I said to you, a couple of people have said to me, get him on. And then when I announced you on, I had a lot of messages, and everybody has had nothing but lovely words to say about you and about how you're a stand-up guy and a lovely guy. And I'd seen that through the camera, and now over the last only couple of weeks, but getting to know you, I've really enjoyed some of the conversations that we've had on a deeper level, rather than just, oh, cool, nice scissors, mate. You know, we've connected a little bit over social media, and for me, it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to sit here for the last 3 and a bit hours and pick your brain and be able to be open with each other and have that deeper level of conversation. Like I said to you, that's how I like my podcast to go. So I thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability, in the sense of sharing the triumphs and also the failures that sort of have got you to the place that you've been, mate. And my only thing I would love to say to you is, like, I know life gets busy, and I know fucking life's in your head's a fucking nightmare, but you're arguably my favorite content creator. I'm sorry anyone else that I watch is watching this, and I'm here waiting. If you put one video out a year or one a week, I'm here for it, mate. I fucking love your shit. So
oh, it's very humbling. It's very nice to hear, but you know, as I said to you, we're all just dudes or ladies or girls or whatever that are keeping these reptiles because we love them. You know, like I don't think I'm anything special from the next bloke, you know, but it's hearing things like that's fuel for the fire. Let's put it that way. That's nice to hear.
It is strange because, like I say, when I I don't know how old you are, to be fair. I don't know if you're much older than me. I'm 29.
34, I think.
There's not much between us, but I remember, like I say, when I met Fee, I was clearly watching you, and I had no aspiration to be on social media. Let's put it that way. So again, I was looking up and I was like, "Oh, this guy's so cool, and he's got great ideas." And I've been implementing it in my keeping throughout my life and stuff. And now that, like I say, I'm on the other side of the fence and I'm becoming a somebody in the eyes of the public, I can appreciate even more the stuff that you've done, because it's very easy to sort of not be on social and go, wow, this guy must put loads of work in, or this guy's this, or this guy's that, or this girl's done this, or whatever the case may be. But when you've actually started doing it yourself and you realize the fucking turmoil that comes with it, and I think it's just a testament to your character, mate, that you're still doing it, still putting it out. You're still the happy, smiley guy that fucking loves lizards, and you're only doing it for the lizards. And as getting to know you more now, I can really fucking tell that you are only doing it for the lizards. And I've got all the time in the world for you, mate. And my DMs are always open if you ever want to chat.
I appreciate it, man. And, you know, keep up the good job that you're doing as well. Like, this podcast is excellent. I've got a stack of stuff to listen through now, so it's going to be good.
It's now on Spotify, so you can listen to it.
Hey, I'll listen to it in the bush when I'm smashing stones.
There you go.
I got something to do now.
Yeah, so the podcast, I forgot to say at the start, the podcast is now on streaming sites. Well, it's on Spotify and Podbean. So if you guys want to listen to this one will be on there in the next couple of days, maybe today, if I can be bothered. But yeah, it's all now live. You don't have to listen to it on YouTube. So goodbye, Paul's ad revenue. But you don't have to listen to it on YouTube. So there we go. But no, honestly, mate, I won't blow any more smoke up your ass. But thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy man, and I'm very, very, very appreciative of the time that you've just given me to share with all these beautiful people.
No, more than happy, man. Anytime. I'm happy to jump back on.
So. Yeah, I'd love to have you. Definitely, we'll revisit it. I need to have a round two with a couple of the other Aussies and get a couple more on. Like I said to you off air, I love the Australian chats. The Australians for me seem to be that. This is going to be a weird way of wording it, but you guys seem to be philosophically further ahead than others with your keeping, if that makes sense. You seem to look in it a bit deeper, forgetting how we keep. That's not in it. But what I'm saying is how, at least for the Australians that I've seen on social and spoken to, you guys seem to have that deeper connection. And I don't know if it's because you keep native, so you have that connection. I don't know what it is, but you guys seem to have that little bit more appreciation for what it is to keep. At least from my experiences, from what I've seen. So I respect that a lot. Yeah. I think that's probably why I've just sort of had that epiphany now talking to you, because I get the same feeling with the other Australians that I speak to on a regular basis. And I always have that impression. And there's a couple of other people on social that I see their posts and I go, these guys they love their shit. And you can tell from someone who has a warped mind, you can tell other people's that minds tick a different way. And again, just talking to you now and sort of thinking about it now, I'm like, maybe it is because they're native species, but all of the people that I speak to UK keepers and they're like, yeah, royal pythons are really cool. And then you speak to like, there's the whole hobby cancelled off the podcast now, but then you speak to some Australians and you guys are like, there's that little bit deeper of a level there. So I appreciate that from you guys.
No, good on the Aussies for leading the way. If that's the way that people are looking at us, that's a good way.
I don't know if it's people or just my fucked up brain, but we'll end on that, ladies and gentlemen. All of Luke's links are in the description. Instagrams, websites, YouTube down below. Please go and check him out. I mean, I know all of you know who he is anyway, but please go and check him out. And again, mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, man. Thank you.
No worries. All right, guys. Well, that is the end of this podcast. We are going to get this show off the road, and I will see you all next Sunday for another banger guest, actually. So you'll have to stay tuned for that. Captive Raptors podcast with Mr. Luke from Beaches Scaly Beasts. Out.